Welcome, everybody. We are starting, I guess, 4 minutes a little behind, but that's okay, right? Um, like I said, this meeting will be recorded. I am Takesha from Chocolate Milk Cafe. I do a lot of the behind the scenes stuff as the executive director. Today we are, sorry. Today we are having a discussion about Black maternal mental health because today is the first day for Black maternal mental health. I will get back to you on what that is after I introduce everybody else, and I pull it up on my screen because I don't have that since I had to shut down my computer and start over here. But with me today is Jillian Fox Majuta of Majuta Wellness and one of our newer facilitators. Also on, which you may or may not see her here and there because she goes off camera, is LaShonda, our resident director of facilitators, Harlem facilitator, and all the things IBCLC for Chocolate Milk Cafe. If you want, Jillian, while I'm getting the other stuff situated, please introduce yourself more if you want to tell anybody anything else about yourself.
Sure. So I'm happily a Chocolate Milk Cafe facilitator for the North chapter. My day job is running a home visiting program with another supervisor, and also in Essex County. I also teach some yoga and meditation on the side. And I'm a mom. I'm a mom of two who I breastfed for 2 and 3 years. That's Sayida there. Life has happened, and I'm on mommy duties right now. And so I'm calling from the car, but I'm happy to be here. Shall I pass it to you, LaShonda?
Oh, sorry, I didn't take it off mute, but yeah, Shonda, you go.
There we go. Hi, everyone. I'm LaShonda Dandridge. I am, like Takesha mentioned, I'm out in the park, so sorry for my swatting of things flying by my face. I am the director of facilitators for Chocolate Milk Cafe. I'm also the facilitator for our Harlem chapter. And in my day job, I am an IBCLC, a board certified lactation consultant, where I do not home visits anymore, but virtual visits for lactation for families. I also teach prenatal classes regarding lactation and newborn care. So all things new parenting slash how to feed your baby from your body is what I'm into. And I'm happy to be here and kicking off Black Maternal Mental Health Week.
Not to be confused with Black Maternal Health Week, which is in April, everyone. So Black Maternal Mental Health Week is a it's fairly new awareness week. I call them Black Awareness Weeks that we acknowledge. That has been coined by Shades of Blue Project and the founder, Kay Matthews. So if you'd like to learn more, I suggest you go on over to Shades of Blue Project's Instagram or Facebook. They have a lot of things going on this week. This morning, I think they kicked it off. So it's just basically addressing, maternal health issues within our community. We are a community that faces a lot of disparities when it comes to a lot of areas, but mostly maternal health. So today we decided that because we deal in postpartum and lactation and all the hormones, we would come to you and have a conversation about that. Please meet us where we are. We are very casual in our conversations. We don't really wish to be so formal. We come as a peer-to-peer, meet you where you are. So meet us where we are today kind of space. Another full disclaimer, and I know you may not be able to read this, but if you have registered to join this event, that registration is mostly for the Q&A segment. So if you know anyone who's trying to get into this conversation, you will be waiting in the waiting room until that happens. I sent out an email for that, so please check your email. But people who have registered and people who engage in the conversation, I will be checking our Facebook page as everyone else is discussing everything that You will be entered to win. We're raffling off of 4 Inspired journals, also by Shades of Blue Project. If you saw our flyer for this, there's a link so you can check out the journal. It looks great, and we want to give them out to people. It is 5:39 Eastern Standard Time, around 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. We are expecting Dr. Sayida Peprah to join us. She's on the West Coast, so hopefully that'll be very interesting for us as well. So,
can I hop in, Keisha? When I just wanted to elaborate on where you said meet us where we are, and just a little disclaimer for my lactation, my IBCLC certification brain. I'm taking that and I want that to translate to people in the sense that if people who do have questions or people who are engaging in the conversation, this conversation doesn't replace actual mental and medical help. So this is, none of us are certified in any counseling per se. This, like Keisha mentioned, it's a casual conversation. We can touch on certain issues that may come up and give suggestions or opinions, but this conversation here shouldn't replace actual treatment and assessment by a medical professional if you do find that you're having any mental health concerns.
yes. And like Shonda's saying, Shonda is saying we are peer-to-peer and community-based. So we're speaking from the lens of experience, and from working within the community, we do emphasize wanting to seek actual support. So Jillian, on our schedule for today, we had a flow planned out, and like Jillian said, life happens. So we were going to talk a little bit about ourselves and Black Maternal Mental Health Week and Chocolate Milk Cafe, and kind of like bring all those things together. We kind of roped LaShonda in to speak on some of the issues about lactation and some of those things. So what do you think, Jillian? Do we want to kind of rope right in, since we don't know how long we'll have LaShonda for, and ask her some questions?
Yeah, so we jump right into picking her brain.
So if you're Black Maternal Mental Health Week, we talk about mental health and postpartum, and what does that have to really do with lactation? Shonda, we talk a lot about, when we're talking to other people, especially facilitators or people we're trying to get in, we talk about oxytocin. Is there any way you could talk about the happiness of lactation, so we can start, I guess, a little more positive? Because when you hear mental health, you kind of think of all the negative things, but there are boosts for positive.
Well, I think I'm going to dial it back and start with just the word postpartum, because I think when people hear of postpartum, they automatically correlate that with postpartum depression, right? So when we talk about postpartum, we're talking about the period after birth, right? And if you're on social media, probably into our little birthing world, you'll see a hashtag going around talking about postpartum is forever, because it is. But when we're talking about that immediate postpartum, there are some things that can arise in sense of having postpartum mood disorders, they're called, or sometimes you'll hear it referred to as the baby blues. So right after you have your baby, I love to say we're all, as much as we like to romanticize a lot of things like breastfeeding and such, we all boil down to hormones, right? Hormone cells, right? So when you have a baby, there's a big hormonal shift because you have expelled a human or two from your womb. And obviously there were hormones that needed to sustain that human in that life. And then once baby is born or babies are born, there's a hormonal shift because you don't need quite this much of this hormone anymore. I'm talking in basic terms because I am not a medical professional. When Dr. Sayida comes on, she can probably give you more medical terms for them. But Yeah, so just these basic terms of, obviously there are hormonal shifts once you have a baby. These hormonal shifts can sometimes shift us into postpartum mood disorders, we call them. After you have your baby, the first 2 weeks or so are kind of categorized as the baby blues, where again, you have those hormonal shifts. It's an overwhelming experience, whether this is your first time being a parent, your second time being a parent, third, fourth time, it is an overwhelming experience. And just like in anything else in life, having an overwhelming experience can put on your psyche, right? Stresses. Hi, puppy. Sorry, I'm in the park and I have a little puppy saying hello. So those first 2 weeks, we can, you may hear them referred to as the baby blues. We know that one of the things, one of the reasons that we push lactation for a myriad of positive reasons, but if I have a client who has a history of anxiety, depression, or postpartum mood disorders, we would want to encourage or support breastfeeding because we know oxytocin, right? I like to call it the love drug. It's something that flows in us that happens. Not only is it helpful for in lactation for pushing out milk and providing milk to your baby, but oxytocin, again, is what a lot of times we talk about it as the bonding hormone. It's what bonds us to our baby. It releases, it's one of the hormones that works on your body being relaxed and in a good state, right? So if I have a client, again, that has this history, we want to put in place supports for breastfeeding to really happen, because if they don't breastfeed, again, they don't get that oxytocin surge, that flow. Again, it's good for many other things in breastfeeding and postpartum in general. But we know that you can maybe have an increase of not only baby blues, but leading towards postpartum depression. That was a very, very long explanation.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I think when you talking about postpartum being forever, and postpartum meaning after birth, because a lot of people correlate with postpartum depression. So highlighting that and then getting into a little bit of lactation is definitely what we need. Yeah, I think Jill and I had so many conversations. I'm trying to figure out which one we're supposed to be at today. But there's something you mentioned, having other people and the baby blues and everything. I think that's definitely a good place for us to highlight why we're here today. Jillian, did you have any thoughts on that? Because my brain has gone to a couple of different places that may seem a little off topic, but in line first, I want to say, because I am following on Facebook, if you are joining us, if you're trying to get into this conversation, note that the conversation is for us to have, and then for Dr. Sayida to come in on, and we were going to open it up to Q&A a little later. So you can comment on our Facebook post, and you can email me. I'll check that as well. So you might see me looking all over the place at all the different places that I'm tracking things. But please know that the waiting room will be reserved for all people who have questions until we're done. But as we're having this conversation, Shonda was talking, I do want to highlight a question that was asked that, okay, I'm going to reference this because I'm having a little bit of short patience with these types of questions, but I do want to acknowledge that some people aren't where I am on the journey. But why do we have Black-centered lactation support? Why do we have Black breastfeeding week? Why do we have Black-centered anything? Because we face disparities, right? So one of our questions someone asked, well, most women, and I will say birthing people in America, face unique, specific barriers for mental health. And what are those barriers for Black mothers specifically, right? So this may be not a malice question, but sometimes we get a lot of, well, what makes Black people different than other people? First, I am going to go on record here to say today that Black is not just a race for us, it is a culture. And especially Black Americans speak to a specific type of culture. There is a stigma in the Black community for mental health and receiving mental health support. So we tend to suffer in silence a lot. I'm not going to give you any statistics because I don't believe that we need statistics to prove that this is an issue. We see it in so many areas. There's trauma. I had a conversation with another doula that we were highlighting the fact that we speak in April about Black maternal health, and we talk about the disparities of, making it out of the hospital. But what we don't talk about is what happens when you make it out of the hospital. And I will emphasize that Black maternal mortality rates are for the first year. And if we're not seeking support in that first year, we're still at risk for Black maternal health. So Black maternal mental health comes in because we need postpartum support. We lack postpartum support, not in rural areas alone, all over. It doesn't matter whether we're well educated, whether we have money, we are still struggling with mental health and it being addressed. There's such a stigma in our society. So we are at a disadvantage. So we need to emphasize and we need to talk about these things. And we need to address that, yes, lactating and providing human milk, actively latching a baby, breastfeeding, body feeding, chest feeding is good. It does not necessarily for everybody remove the risk of having mental health issues. So we really need to start talking about them, and we really want to emphasize that within our circles.
Can I jump in there too, Takesha? Just also not only to think about the postpartum period as we're speaking about maternal mental health, but even while we're pregnant, one of the barriers, if you're talking about intersectionality of all of the isms, right? When we're going to the doctor, when we're even saying that something isn't going on, we're not being heard. So dealing with various isms as we're going through life before we even become pregnant, and then working through the challenges that come along with the added hormones and added life stressors and all the things that Takesha mentioned, because we're living in a society that is not necessarily designed for us, that is not designed for us. We're often struggling with what to do, where to go, and sometimes that struggle happens inside. I'm a believer that our body holds on to so many things, whether it's from me or from my ancestors, and there's a lot of that we have to work through. And so when it comes to having any of the Black acknowledgements, in particular, since we're talking about Black maternal mental health, if we look historically, we were not given the opportunity to even be acknowledged as humans, right? To even be able to have conversations outside of our own practices that were often shunned or we were denied from practicing. So being able to get back to some of those practices, which I feel like we're moving towards now, is one of the reasons why we have to highlight Black anything, especially when we're coming to mental health.
Reclamation. Yeah.
And
Reclaiming our time.
It's also the strong Black woman title, right? You hear like, oh, she's a strong Black woman, and even within our own community, it's like, well, I'm supposed to be a strong Black woman. So if I'm having a moment of quote unquote weakness, showing that, right, is looked down upon. What do you mean you need help? What do you mean you got to go to a therapist? You're supposed to be a strong Black woman. So that strong Black woman title is actually having a negative impact on us.
You bring that up, and I'll be fully transparent. I had someone in one of my support groups, no longer, who after having my twins made a comment to me about, I'm waiting for you to like have a mental breakdown. And I'm like, I've had several. It just doesn't look the same for some people, my little rant on Facebook maybe looked angry to them. That's a cry for help for me, but for some people they see it a different way. And I even, as Jillian was talking, I was thinking about how I saw in some posts, I think today or yesterday, about Stacey Patton, it was today, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger mentality. And she was like, what doesn't kill you makes you weaker, because mental health wise, it's stripping away of us. We may be able to build up this hard, crusty, exterior that everyone sees, but we're still delicate human beings. We still bleed and cry and have pain just the same way, just because history has painted us to be strong and thick or whatever, that's not really true. Like we're human. So yeah. So
You
talking
brought
about
up
it.
something, Takesha, just the way it looks, right? The way stress looks, the way strength looks. And also, you can't always tell what it looks like when somebody's asking for help, you know, but also if somebody's asking for help, we don't always know how to help, right? And then I also feel like there's some challenges when we only think about strength and weakness. What about that in between? Because I'm not being strong in this moment does not necessarily make me weak, right? I could be somewhere in between. And I think sometimes that space in between is it's kind of a struggle inside to figure out, because you got to be one thing or the other in the way our culture, our society is kind of set up. So it's kind of helpful for me to think about what help looks like and asking questions like that. Well, how can I help you? What would be helpful to you? I remember working with a family, and I kept saying to her, "Oh, you're so strong," this and she was like, "But I don't want to be strong right now." And I had to pause because I didn't know how to respond to that.
That's actually one of my, like when I teach a class on lactation or newborn care, that's one of the homework assignments I give to people, because sometimes people say they need support, but they don't actually know how to ask for support in the correct way, right? Or they don't know, they don't know how to ask for support, or just more so the correct way. So like I give the homework assignment of, you really should go home and think about what type of support you're going to need, and what is the real resource that you can tap into for that support. Because people think like, oh, because I have my mom or my sister or my cousin, right, that they can be supportive. But sometimes our moms aren't really that supportive. If you have a toxic relationship with your mom or your sister or your cousin, just because you have a baby doesn't mean that it's all going to magically change, right? So sometimes you can't reach out to those people, and that's okay, right? If you need someone to support you that's just going to sit there, but you have a cousin who gabs all the time and that's not what you need, like, know your true areas and resources of support. And sometimes it's not your immediate circle, and that's okay, right? And don't feel like, oh, well, you are my cousin or friend or whatever, you're supposed to be supportive to me. Again, just because you have a baby doesn't mean that it magically, like, fixes all of these relationships. So if that's like, just really be true to yourself and really take this time, right, to really think about what support I need, where's the resources that I can get the support, and how is that support supposed to look, and write it down. Like, sometimes, like, you're like, oh, I need support and I need somebody to go to the supermarket for me, but now I got to find somebody to go to the supermarket and write a list and stuff, and that can add stress to you, right? So it's like, write it all down, have it, so it's just like, put it in an email, you can send it out to people, or like, no, like when somebody asks, you can just have it there. It's not the stress of having to think about, okay, now what support do I need right now, what do I really need? And then, so once baby's here and you're in the thick of it, that's not the time to be doing it. So if you're listening to this out there, and again, you have mental health concerns, right? If that's one of the concerns that you're having prenatally, this is the perfect time to like start thinking about it and to really set up your postpartum care. That's another thing I don't think people think about, um, postpartum in that sense. And I know we keep referring to postpartum a lot, but even during pregnancy, a lot of mental health issues can come up too. So I don't want to not talk about that. Not That's valid too.
You gave two things. One, you made me think about the idea, I think, while you were all talking about how we also get gaslit as Black women because we need to ask nicely for things, and whatever that looks like to somebody. And I always say it as, if somebody thinks you're aggressive, no matter what you say to them is going to feel aggressive. So that tends to be a challenge. I know I face that a lot, like asking for help, but asking for a specific type of help and no one being able to provide that type of help. So looking like I'm ungrateful. So I know we tend to battle those kind of things. Like, if I can't get the help that I need the way I need it, then I don't, why even ask, or why even, like, you end up in this like vicious cycle. But before we get too far into just chatting or whatever, I do want to actually ask you, LaShonda, about I mean, postpartum, as far as lactation support and like Any issues or any things that you also want to bring up that you see people battling as someone who's a facilitator for Chocolate Milk Cafe or an IBCLC in the field that you wish more people kind of took note about? Because
We don't
being
have
touched out,
time.
I know.
This is
Okay, so
only till 7:30.
I'll go with like being touched out as a serious
Yeah,
one. You know, like
yeah,
my kid. Look, I am almost 7 years postpartum from my twins, and I still get
yeah,
touched out. You know,
yeah.
so whether
So touched out in the sense of, I think, yes, that's probably one of the most immediate things. Like people go into pregnancy and postpartum and wanting to breastfeed and this and having a baby is supposed to be this beautiful experience. And sometimes it's not always that way. Sometimes you may look at your baby and be like, I really don't know what I'm doing. I really don't want to be doing this right now. But the stress of it of I have to take care of this human, right, can be a stress. And then the guilt of that, of feeling that way, right? So it spirals. So that is a very common one we don't talk enough about. Of I really just don't like my baby right now. Right. And so a lot of people, especially in our community, don't want to utter that because it can lead to ACS being involved, somebody's coming to take your child, and then that stress. And then again, even if you have mental health issues, then it's just this downward spiral, right? So if you are feeling that way, again, reaching out to if you're working with lactation and you're feeling that way, reaching out to a lactation consultant will help you find therapists and mental health support for that feeling. I think when you were talking about before too, I wanted to hop in and say, not only like being gaslit and stuff, but and Jillian was saying about like we were talking about strong Black women and stuff and expressing your concerns or you're asking for help. I think a big thing too is that we're not validated. When you say something, it's like, why are you stressed? Or you have much help, or you got this. So it's not being validated in your feelings when it's like, whatever you're feeling is valid, right? End of
I love
sentence.
being valid. I love when people validate my feelings. It takes a
Yeah,
load off.
yeah. So whatever you're feeling, it's valid, point blank, and you need to find people who are going to support that. So I think yes, one of the things that's not talked about a lot, immediate postpartum, is I don't have this euphoric feeling of loving my baby and loving this parenting experience. And
Yeah,
again, that can be a spiral. Or feeding my baby, it not working out the way I thought, right? And it being a chore and a burden. And I don't really want to do this because I want my body back. I've carried this child for 35, 36, 40, 42, or whatever, however many weeks. And now my body is still not mine, right? So even if they want to solely breastfeed, so it's that like juxtaposition, right? I want to do this, but at the same time doing it is making me hate this, right?
hmm
So there's that. And so the being touched out and having the baby and being the sole provider, right? The sole, like your baby, if you're breastfeeding and such, your baby does rely on you, right? But how can we balance that, right? So sometimes with lactation, with breastfeeding, chest feeding, body feeding, it's not an all or nothing sometimes, right? And the way we talk about it, the way society presents it sometimes, it's like, well, if the baby's not at the breast, then you're not really breastfeeding. Human milk is what I strive for because we know that human milk is the gold standard. It just is, right?
first food.
Right. So, but there is a way that you can create balance. That, like you mentioned before, meeting people where they are. And if you are having lactation, even when we got these letters behind our name, IBCLCs, you're having people, doulas or whatever, pushing you to something that you're not comfortable with, that is not the right support for you. So find someone. Another thing that's not really talked about is in the lactation world, we call breastfeeding aversion.
Yeah,
So when you're
that was
feeding,
mine.
again, this oxytocin starts to flow. It's supposed to be help you bond and have this euphoric feeling. And sometimes it can create a negative feeling where people feel rage or people feel nauseous or people feel sick and people feel like I to get this kid away from me,
Mhm.
right? It can create a negative, and sometimes that happens with the letdown, and we call it an aversion. So again, and then people don't want to talk about it. because this is not what I heard. This is not how it's supposed to be, right? And again, starts to spiral down, right? A negative, and then they end up, okay, well, I'm just not going to breastfeed. I'm not going to pup. I'm not going to do this, and they end up going to formula, which is fine. But the issue and the mental health that plays into that is that they weren't validated, and they didn't have informed consent or education to help them make that shift. Because there's many times that I work with families where we have to make that shift for a number of reasons. But when you're just like, you go to the doctor or your family is saying, well, just stop breastfeeding. It's not that simple. Not that simple sometimes. So again, being able to talk it through. And let me also put a caveat out there that lactation consultants are not therapists. Not that, you may have some out there who are licensed therapists, but again, talking it through, like, I don't claim to be a therapist, but sometimes just being able to talk to, I can direct you to resources, right, that can help you through this, or direct you to a therapist to talk to, right? But a lot of my consults is just being able to talk through a situation with a family, right? Whether it's the lactating person or sometimes it's the whole family we pull in, and coming to a shared decision, or a decision that fits well in your heart and well in your soul, can help. And we deal, because it can bring up a lot of mental health stuff. I say feeding your baby from your body is all mental. The physical stuff we can get through, the latch and all that stuff, but it is a huge mental shift.
Yeah. All right.
And
Jillian
I
had
think you
something.
brought up a lot about things that trigger people. But again, in our community, one, asking for help is stigmatized. You can't take care of this and you can't figure this out, and all of those languages. But I do think that sometimes we don't talk about our triggers. We don't know what our own triggers are before we conceive. And so sometimes I feel like we don't have conversations about how what was happening before can will remain, but also can be heightened during the pregnancy, postpartum. And if we don't have supportive people who are able to kind of help us filter through this and then get to a professional, even if we have access to a professional, because sometimes we don't have access to a professional, without a year-long waiting list and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's
Especially with the
important for us
pandemic.
to, right, have these conversations. What is a trigger? You know, what will I feel like a bad mom, this bad mommy syndrome, if I'm not able to feed my child my milk? No one is talking about milk donations in my community. So how do I even begin to process that that's a thing, that people have the same challenges as me? So
Yeah.
I think you bring up a lot about that.
Yeah. And talking about the triggers too. So also the way you parent and the way you feed your child, like breastfeeding, can also trigger other people in your family, because they didn't get to do that, or they didn't have the support. So their triggers are now they're
See,
projecting
now
their stuff
see,
on you.
And that's where all that lack of support and stuff comes in, right? That's why we are very emphasis on like community and building support systems and having these meetups and stuff like that, where you can find people who are able to actually support you where you are and provide, because it even, some people even have guilt in the other way. Like, we're not going to just sit here and pretend that lactate, like breastfeeding, choosing to breastfeed, you are only going to get like negative energy from family members. There are some people who, even if they decide to wean or if they can't do it or whatever, they get negative energy in that way because other people have perceived ideas of how long you should breastfeed for or what you should be providing or whatever. So we want that support all around. And, you need someone in your corner who is going to support you where you are. We also have that stigma in our society where when the baby comes, it's all about the baby. But my thing is, if you really truly want to help the baby, you help the lactating person. That's the person that you need to be happy. It's forget happy wife, whatever that crap is. Focus on the
I like
lactating person.
happy house, happy spouse, right? Everybody has to be happy, okay? But also, I think if we're talking about gender roles and all of that, a lot of times the caring of the caring is often put on women, females, right? But I feel like your supporter can be a male, can be a
Mhm.
man. One of my biggest supporters was my father. You know, he would tell me, maybe you need to just calm down, take a breath. Don't you know those people? He would say he wouldn't know the names of people. Don't you have somebody over there that you can call? You know, he would
Mhm.
remind me of these things. And I think sometimes um it becomes the mom can take on all of that. Like the feeding has to be me. Or sometimes the father or the partner can feel left out. But the support can also facilitate the lactation process, but also help the birthing person um find some type of regulation, right? To be able to acknowledge feelings. One of the phrases that I really don't like is "you'll be all right." You're gonna be all right. But I'm not right now, and we
Will
don't
I?
know what I
Oh,
don't, and while I'm in it, I don't even remember what all right feels like. So,
that's
how
like,
do you help me process that?
yeah, that's like that phrase. The days are long, but the years are short. Get out of my face. Oh, okay. Okay,
So
one
when
more
I
on this
do,
one. Actually, go, Sean.
so I do talk about so like for Talking About Cafe, it's not just lactating person. We want to invite the whole family because like you said, it's not just the person. It is, I always say when my consult, sometimes it takes many hands. How many hands we need to hold them hands out of the way so we can latch baby onto that breast, right? Or sometimes it takes many brains, right, to feed a baby in those new days. So it's so if you're out there and you're listening to this and you're pregnant and you're planning on taking classes, take your partner with you. You know, I have a lot of people who show up at class, who show up at groups, and they're by themselves, but you need that other brain, right? Because we all learn differently. There'll be some things that, oh, you may hear that I didn't hear and you pick up and stuff. So when I go into a consult and like people want to, like the person who's not feeding, they're like, oh, I'll just leave you. I'm like, no, 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 sit on down right here. We all gonna learn how to feed this baby, right? So it is very much a many hands make light work. You know, that's my favorite saying, right? Many hands make light work.
I thought that's what
Type
you were gonna
of
say before.
it is many hands on deck experience. But yeah, what was the other question you had?
Okay, so
Wait, before you go into that, just with what, sorry, with what Shonda just said, you just made me think of something just in terms of protecting your peace. Because again, what you said before was honoring and knowing who you can have in your space. Because, once the baby is born, everybody's coming and bringing. And I think in order to protect your peace and protect your mental health, speaking about it, you know, how are you doing? I'm okay. I'm fine. I was just talking about this with my cousin the other day. How do we begin to practice now with answering that question honestly? How are you doing? I'm happy. How are you doing? I'm a little overwhelmed right now. How do we begin to actually have these answer simple questions that are coming up in life so that we can practice honoring where we are social and emotionally, which I believe has an impact on our psyche and our mental health as we move through life, so that by the time we are pregnant and parenting, we've already gotten this practice. Yeah. So
she's
I'm
supposed to
sorry,
be
your question
answering.
was Keisha.
Oh
No,
no,
that was just my
you were
statement.
just exploring. Okay,
I,
okay.
I was just releasing.
All right, all right. So I have two more things. So in having this conversation and building up to this, we did have a conversation about weaning. And since we do still have an IBCLC on the line, speaking to the idea of what that does to your mental state. We're in a pandemic. We do have sleep deprivation as an issue that can help with affect your mental health. But what about weaning? If you're weaning too early, or weaning because other people insist you may, or because the baby is a certain age, but not necessarily a readiness for you and the baby. Um, Shonda, are you coming back? I don't know. I wanted you to talk a little
Yes,
bit
no, no,
about
no.
like,
I wanted you to end your statement before. I'm on 17%, so I'm trying to conserve. So weaning is, once I got into lactation, I started working with families. I started to realize that weaning is not just for like, oh, okay, my baby is on to the next step, and you know, this magic number of like, some people want to do it for 3 months or 6 months or a year, right? And then the baby's going to get milk, cow's milk or formula and solids and It's all good. Like, boom, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. That's the way it goes, right? So it's not that. It sometimes the what I've encountered working with families is that weaning is sometimes harder on the lactating person than the actual baby. Sometimes babies will just kind of go, oh, okay, I'm ready for the next step. And they'll go on to the next thing. And then you're like, oh, you didn't need me anymore. I didn't know that was going to be my last time that we had great feet. So that brings up all mental, right? That brings up emotions, not so mental health, but it brings up emotions, right? So there's that. There is, if you are being told to, okay, you just need to stop because you're being pressured or you don't like what other people are saying, and you end up just stopping, again, hormones, right? So that switch and that drop off in the hormones sometimes can trigger mental health concerns because the body is just like, okay, we had this deep nosedive of a shift, right? And it wasn't ready for it yet.
Where's my
Sometimes we
oxytocin?
sometimes we have to wean because I've had clients who either they have like an oversupply. When this one comes up because I've had this more recently where they had a crazy oversupply where they had to keep getting their breast drained. It just wasn't working, and the best thing was to just cease milk production, right? So that, but being able to talk through that and understand, right, mentally, that be able to comprehend and really understand it and be okay with it, right? There's that. There are people who may have to go on medications, whether for mental health concerns or chemo medications, right? That you have to stop milk production. You can't feed the baby, like even pump and bottle feed. So we have to stop milk production. So in those cases, again, sometimes it can be just in my opinion, in all instances, we should do a gradual, but sometimes you have to do it a little bit more gradually. If in the case where you have to go on a certain medication by a certain time. Um, but again, going back to just feeling validated, listening to people, talking it through, and being able to say, okay, this is why, and this is how we're going to do it. I think in any case of, ooh, we have an excited baby. In any case of your body, right? Having informed, having information, having a say where it's a collective and team, you know, discussion. Many times in the medical field in general, especially with Black bodies, you're just being told what to do and they're just doing things to your body, right? But having a discussion where you're an active participant in your care is the ultimate goal.
Yeah. I would say it's also a loss of coping mechanism. I know when I wean my kids, that I like being able to soothe them and care for them in the way that I was used to was like kind of a morning cycle, like, oh man, I really, how am I
Like, what
supposed
am I gonna do now? I can't, like, even now at 7 years old, it's like, can I just put the boob in your mouth so you can shut up?
Well, I don't know how to put my kids to sleep without a boob. I actually don't. Like, I'm so grateful when my husband did bedtime because I was like, how do you put them to sleep once you don't nurse them anymore? What happens here? Hush, hush, baby.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so let's touch on that a little bit too, like the pacifying. Like I always tell people, like they say, oh, the baby's using me as a pacifier. That's okay. Your baby using you as a pacifier is okay. That is what
What?
humans
So
did
Shonda,
way before
can I?
pacifiers were invented.
Pacifiers were invented to replace the breast.
But I do think sometimes exploring that with the parent to figure out what's going on there
Yeah,
because
I didn't
sometimes,
finish. I didn't finish.
oh, sorry.
So I was gonna say pacify, your baby using you to pacify is okay if it is okay with you as well. So if it's not painful, if you're just hanging out and you're like, okay, we're just chilling, that is okay. In the sense of, like, people say it as a negative. Oh, your baby's just using you as a pacifier, right? So, but if you feel touched out and you're like, I don't want this, then let's help explore other ways. But if you're cool with it and somebody's giving you grief about it, but that's that person's trigger and that person's grief, recognize that it's that person's triggering, that person's grief, or that person's lack of education. But if you're okay with it, it is your body. And if that's what helps soothe your baby and put your baby to sleep, and it's working for the time being, it's not to say that this, and I think another thing too, especially in the immediate postpartum, we feel like when we get into something, it's going to be forever, right? I don't know any college students that are still breastfeeding. I
Huh?
don't know. So it's not forever, but you know,
Feels
it's
like it.
stages.
But it's also I was gonna say the idea of we talk in lactation that they don't just nurse for food, nutrition, and nurse for comfort. There are other reasons why nursing happens, and because of our modernized society, we're on the go all the time. We miss out on those things. Like that is part of the bonding process.
Yes, and speaking of mental health, how are we helping our babies understand their bodies? How are we paying attention? That's basketball coach, everybody. Say hi to the basketball coach, Coach Jonathan.
I'm like, you got
But
a
how do
person at
we
your window.
how do we as lactating people, as parents, right? How do we acknowledge what our bodies are telling us? Or do we just ignore that? You know, I remember when I was nursing, somebody, I don't remember who it was, told me that I am a woman first. They reminded me that I am a woman first. And this is Jillian saying I'm a woman. You're a person first before you're a parent. So I think sometimes when we become a parent, there's a lot of pressure on us to forget that we are who we are before we became a parent. And that creates other challenges when it comes to our mental health, because it's almost like we have to put that person aside in order to do everything for this other little person. And we're not really even thinking about what we're teaching them about honoring self, honoring body. There's so many messages that our bodies give us, even from children. As children, there's so many messages that our body give us. And again, talking about historically and why we have to have these things for Black people in particular, our bodies were removed from us from way back when, right? And we're still learning how to honor and take on and own our bodies for ourselves and learn what our bodies are teaching us and paying attention to all of that. So I think that as we're nursing and as we are creating this relationship, and again, whether the person is your partner or your child, it's still a relationship, and you have to have communication, verbal or nonverbal. There is communication that has to happen.
All right, I'm gonna wrap up with Lashonda because she's gonna have to get off before
Oh,
her phone dies, and then we can continue. Because Saida's gonna be joining us in like 9 minutes if we're lucky. So
yay.
Lashonda, I have two things for you. Either you can answer the question about how you prioritize rest, or you can answer the question that someone asked here about advice to somebody who baby wouldn't latch and they were kind of sad about it and they pumped, but they what kind of advice would you give to somebody like that? Where do you want to go?
Okay, let me see if I can answer them quickly before my phone dies. For babies who don't latch, um, so again, getting some support around that, reaching out, even still reaching out to a lactation consultant and talking it through, hopping into a chocolate milk cafe or a support group to talk it through. So sometimes babies don't latch. I always say that's why I have a job. Sometimes babies don't latch. Um, Again, we romanticize breastfeeding and like all this stuff, but sometimes babies don't latch. So I don't know how old this baby is, because I was gonna say sometimes I work with people like 2, 3 months, 4 months in, and babies latch. So sometimes babies don't latch at all. Sometimes babies don't latch in the beginning, right? If baby's not latching, I would say that there is a reason, right? Sometimes it's oral restrictions in the mouth, something's going on. So I would hope that this person was able to work with lactation consultant and be able to pinpoint what's happening, right? If it's structural, right? And then as far as again, pumping, I like to say, any mama's milk, any human milk is good mama's milk. And there are other ways to bond, right? In that sense. So again, but if again, we don't know how old this baby is, but it's obviously they reached out and made the question. So it's still something that is on your psyche. Reach out and talk about it, right? sometimes talking it through. Maybe if you do find the reason that, oh, okay, this is what was happening and I didn't get a chance, and it just didn't work out for us, right? You and your baby. Sometimes that kind of peace of mind to know, to be able to pinpoint and say, okay, I understand that now. So that may be helpful for some people. So still talk about it, and come to a resolution in your mind and body and soul that you need to, right, for your particular situation. And in terms of rest, um, prioritize it. It is a need. Rest makes milk.
How are
So
you prioritizing
how
rest?
do I prioritize rest for myself?
Yes. Yes.
I have, so with, if I want to get a little personal here. So number one, when Jillian was talking about like being a person, I'll tell you, I just got a book in the mail yesterday about like reconnecting with yourself, and it has questions and stuff to like, because I feel like I'm 12 years out, but I feel like, who am I? Right. And so now I got this book that I can go on a little journey, and I'm gonna prioritize and make myself really do it, because I do feel like, whoa, who is LaShonda again? Like, what do I really like? And what did I really, so that's what I'm doing. So even 12 years out, we still have to do it as parents sometimes, right? And then for me, I've, with this panini, right? I've been like working like crazy and just being in this. So a month ago, I stopped working on Saturdays, and like put my Sunday schedule later in the day, so I have like kind of a full weekend. And so that for me, not having the kind of stress of like, okay, and I got to get up Saturday morning to, I like to sleep, so and not be interrupted. So that's why I'm kind of dreading going to my sister's house next week with her children, who wake up very early. And for those of you who don't know, Takesha is my sister, so that's why I'm saying it. And her children wake up very early. But they know when
Hi, how are you doing? What's going on? Are you awake yet?
when Auntie Shasha's around, especially when they come to Auntie Shasha's house, they know if Auntie Shasha's eyes are closed, you don't wake her up. So anyway, so I do like my sleep. So knowing that I don't have to get up on a Saturday morning and teach classes anymore and stuff, like that's why I got to the point where I was like, okay, I can't do this. I have to shut it down. So I can be able to give myself at least Saturdays. I don't answer Takesha's emails anymore on Saturdays. Like I give myself the whole day to just not, I can choose to tap in and look at my emails, but that's a choice. I've taken away the pressure of it. So with rest, with, you have to prioritize it. Like you have to make it and just make a stand and say, I have to do it. And I know for me personally, I have to do it because if I don't, my body is going to shut down. Like my body will tell you, you need to sleep. Right. So I'll get headaches, so I know, and I don't like that feeling. So I have to prioritize it before my body does it for me.
All right, well, that's fair.
That, thank you, Shonda. And can
That
you
bar.
share that book in the chat somewhere in Facebook? You know, y'all know I'm not good with Facebook land, but maybe you can share the book for people
Yeah,
who
pop
want
on.
to reconnect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pop on over to Facebook and share that book with us. And
Yeah.
thank you for joining us today. You definitely made this a lot
Thank
more of a
you.
fruitful conversation because Jillian and I are like, well, we're not experts in any field. We like to
You don't
talk.
have to be an expert. It's not
Oh,
that.
we
You
know I'm
don't
saying
have
we
to
like to
be an
talk, but you gave
expert.
us a lot extra stuff that was very helpful.
And I, like I said, I'm not even an expert. I'm sure Dr. Pepper will be able to give you more technical terms. I speak in like just the layman, the most simplest terms, because that's how my brain really functions as
You
well.
can say
So
laymanist. I would have said it.
laymanist.
That works for me. I need stuff that at a fifth grade level education just so I can process it all sometimes. And then when I get it, then I can go off into whatever. But I need it slowed down for me. Explain it
If
to
I'm
me.
able, if I'm able to get if I'm able to get a charger, I'll hop back in because I do want to see Dr. Pepper too. But I could always watch the replay.
All right, well, and we're still live on Facebook.
Thank
I'm going to
you.
do another disclaimer because we have people waiting in the waiting room. We're not to our Q&A segment yet. If Dr. Pepper doesn't join us right away, we will, move back and forth, and then maybe Jill and I will do that, talk some questions. But I did touch on some of them here today, so we didn't, leave anybody out just yet. All right. Well,
Okay.
LaShonda, thank you so much. See you later.
See, Shonda.
Yeah, that's good. So again, I will say if you are waiting in the waiting room because we're not ready for the Q&A segment, this is not our normal peer-to-peer support group session. We wanted to talk this out, kind of talk to you. I know some people who are used to us having a group setting. So when we have a Zoom, people join it, especially if we allow you to register. That was meant more for when people come on for question and answer time that we are not ready for yet, because we wanted to get as much information out there as possible. And we didn't want to have to deal with muting people and all the stuff that can go on in the screen. So that's why, but I do see a thing that Dr. Sayida Peprah is joining us. So that works out really well. So let me see if I can add her to the room when she pops up on my end. But that was fun. How are you feeling, Jillian?
I'm feeling great. This is feeling really good. I hope that we're answering some people's questions. You know, I'm technically challenged, so I can't even find the Facebook Live. So I don't know if anybody's asking questions or anything. I
People
thought
are
I was in
talking. It just tells me a lot of people are. One of our facilitators, Orlandi, was commenting in the beginning, and then we have some people just amplifying what we're saying. Nothing felt like it was a true question. If I did not, please tell me that I missed a question in the Facebook. I don't see an actual question, just people, here. But do we want to kind of do you have an intro for Dr. Sayida? Do you want her to introduce herself? What's the
I was
goal?
gonna have her introduce herself so she can and answer the first question that we have for her all at once. And I know she's coming off of a thing into a thing. And we know how that is without talking about mental health, right? In Zoom world, at my day job, we just started saying, let's give ourselves 10 or 5 or 10 minutes to end meetings early so we can transition, whether you have to breathe, release, sip some water without covering, all of that. So she'll join us when she can. But I loved what, right, the restroom. Speaking of rest, not necessarily the restroom, but how do you prioritize your rest, Takesha?
I know when
Honestly.
I had Shonda answer, and I was like, so I'm not on TikTok, but thankfully I'm on Facebook and Instagram, so I get to see TikTok videos shared. And that go lay down video is my jam. Have y'all seen it? Oh, I'm gonna share it with you. I'm not gonna do it because my voice will not do it justice, but it's just a lady saying, "Go lay down." I'm about to go lay down. Like it's awesome. And then people have remixed it, so I like to play that once in a while. Even sometimes I sing it to my kids to go to bed. Go lay down. So she's singing it like in a church hymn. Like it's really lovely. I follow her on Instagram too, so it's kind of fun to see all the different things. She made it into a what's it called? A SoundCloud, like audio. So we might play that for Black Breastfeeding Week, because I think, and in case for anyone doesn't know why we're asking this, because of Black Breastfeeding Week, the thing is the big pause. So prioritizing rest is kind of like the thing for this year. So we're talking about it. So I've been trying to take more naps. I have not been doing a great
Yes
job
to
with
the
that.
nap life.
I miss naps. My whole childhood was devolved around naps, and I realized as an adult, as a parent, I was getting naps when children, I was I was resenting it, but one kid would not sleep for a nap unless I slept with them. So then that became the thing, and then my kids gave up naps kind of early. But I miss naps. So I pass out on the couch from here to there. The problem is that no matter where I fall asleep, people see me with my eyes closed. They think it's still an invitation to bother me. So I haven't mastered it yet. But yeah, I'm trying to get them more naps in. That nap ministry is another thing I follow. So what about you?
Yeah, nap ministry. I follow it, but I'm not on social media often enough for it to really mean something. But it reminds me that napping is okay. Because I'm often feeling like I don't have time to nap. But when I do nap, I feel so much better. Can you hear coaching in the background? No? Okay, good.
But then again, there's yelling
One,
happening in my background. So who knows what we.
oh, okay. So we're living life for real. One of the things that has been extremely helpful for me, I have an iPhone and I put a bedtime on it. And so without me thinking, I think it's Sunday through Friday or something like that. Automatically, my phone goes on do not disturb, and I can only receive phone calls from my favorites. I can't even receive the ding or whatever with text messages from my favorites. It's on do not disturb without me even thinking about it.
What
So if I
time is it?
choose to look at my phone, okay, I want to say 9:45, 9:50, and I'm often asleep before my children. I generally go to sleep around 10:30 or so, unless I'm having a movie night or something. I go to sleep around 10:30 or so, and then hi, and I don't usually rise until maybe 5:30, 6 o'clock. So I started teaching my children that my room is my sacred space. So they're learning to knock on the door if it's closed, which is not often. Um, so, and when they forget, I'm like, okay, sacred space, let's try again. Let's try again.
Oh,
Look,
you
I
lead with
need my room.
gentleness. That's probably my issue. I get mad.
Most of the time I do, but I had to let them know if mommy's door is closed, and sometimes they come and tuck me in. They're like, "Mommy, we're going to bed now. I'm coming to tuck you
Yeah, you're back to your white background. We see it.
in."
Although your home looks beautiful.
Yeah,
You're mute.
but we can't hear you.
Uh,
There we go. Hi,
yeah,
peace.
that's beautiful.
Hi.
Hello. We are still recording. We're
Welcome.
talking about our rest, Sayida.
Yes.
But we're gonna what do you want to do? Just get her. Since you're on, we'll do like your introduction. If you wanna do you want me to ask the question, Jillian, or you want to ask it?
Yeah, just tell us who you are and what you do. Just tell us
Absolutely.
about who you are and your work in maternal
Yeah.
mental health.
Well, first of all, I'm excited to be here with you, Takesha and Jillian. We've all
Yay,
connected
welcome.
over the years in different ways, and always hoping to get together again. And I guess in this virtual space, we can do what we can.
Yeah, you're you're Jersey born, so it's good to be
Yes,
home in a way.
exactly. No, I do. I feel like this is my crew, even though I'm not with you all the time. Like this is my Jersey folks. And people from like back home will call and be like, "Oh, do you know a doula?" And I'm like, "Let me text Jillian. Let me see, like somebody like my crew out there." So so happy to be
And then
connected this way.
sometimes I say, let me text Keisha.
Exactly. Yes, yes, yes. You get reeled in for sure. So it's so awesome to see all of us. I mean, this is, I think, when we think about the Black community and the way that we can work in the sisterhood, it's pretty expansive in maternal health because we are few of us, but also in many ways we get to be connected in a special way. So I am a clinical psychologist. I'm a doula. I'm a community doula trainer and mentor and organizer and coordinator in as many ways as possible that I can give. Put money in the hands of community doulas and put opportunities on the table where big organizations or hospitals or people are thinking about what amazing thing can we do to increase the benefits and the efficacy of our programs and shift the trajectory of the disparities. And I'm like, have you thought about doulas? Doulas are amazing. We are not necessarily meant to be the Band-Aid of all things, but we certainly show up in spaces and really create a lot of continuity that is not there in our healthcare system. And so I do a lot to talk about and advocate for community doula work for lactation folks, because that's like right in the same family, making sure that those that are in the community and can and want to are able to breastfeed and chest feed and have access to all the things they need to have the support, because we know historically we haven't had that kind of support in the community. And I do a lot of diversity training, a lot of implicit bias training, and talking about historical resilience and historical trauma, and just making sure that everybody who's serving our people know what they need to know to have a context for compassion and understanding and thoughtfulness about the way that they create programs and offer interventions. I do a lot, as much as I can. And I rest, though. I will say that, to go back to what you were saying, I have a pretty intentional meditation practice and community, a lot around, goddess and sister circles, and spending a lot of time, with my children. I have a 13-year-old, no, I have a 14-year-old now. She turned 14 last week, and 11-year-old girls. And so I'm a mama and I'm in that adolescent and teen mama stage, which is really fun. And yeah, I'm sure something else that I haven't thought of that I'll talk about at some point.
Sorry, I just shooing my kids away because
That's
they
okay.
get louder as they got closer. If they're outside. Well, I don't think you said where you are, even though we mentioned Jersey over
Oh,
here.
right.
You want to highlight where you are?
Definitely. I live in Southern California, in the Inland Empire, actually. I do a lot of service and trainings and connect with community in Los Angeles County, which is adjacent to the Inland Empire counties, which are Riverside and San Bernardino. And also do a lot of work with Northern California folks. So I feel like I'm a California general support person. But I went to college in Atlanta. I went to Spelman. So I feel like I have a lot of ties to Atlanta folks, and definitely, my hometown and a lot of family are still in Jersey and New York. And so East Coast is pretty heavy on my mind. I go back home as much as I can and try to connect there as well.
Nationwide.
Yeah.
You do it all. I love it. So one of our questions here we have for you is like, what are some of the most common challenges when working with Black people in the perinatal and postpartum period? We kind of touched a little bit in lactation in our first hour,
Okay, perfect.
but we want to still, because Black maternal health, mental health, it all comes together. So we want to talk mostly about your experiences and how
And
that
mental
shows up
health.
for you. Yeah.
Perfect. So most common uh, challenges in Black maternal health, mental health, is what you said, right? You could put the question in the chat for me, so I'll keep remembering when you say it, so I can remember. Okay, so I would say the first thing is, a lot of times people in general, when they're looking at like maternal mental health or perinatal mental health, they're looking for like clinically diagnosable problems. And I think that it's better for people to think about just the mental health and the mental wellness state that a person is starting off in pregnancy, and what are the stressors that they're dealing with. Because wherever your baseline is, if you have additional stressors, which pregnancy and the postpartum period typically bring, even if you have the best circumstances, you may feel like this is a new experience and it has added on to other experiences that you're already having in a way that can create stress. And how people are able to tolerate and cope with stress is really the part where they need the most support. And so getting a full assessment of that, I think, is really important. And I think that that's missed with Black women a lot of times, because people are looking generally just for clinical things, and especially, someone to look unable to function, saying and expressing that they're feeling overwhelmed. And you may not find that the average Black mother is going to say, oh, I'm feeling so overwhelmed, I'm not going to be able to take care of myself and maintain my life. Like, that is not typically the way that you might find that we present. You may say, well, how you doing? I'm doing fine. It's a struggle, but I'm making it happen. And so that might sound really confident for somebody, versus somebody in the community might be like, oh, so what's really happening? Like, how are you really feeling? Like, what does that mean? Like, you're working it out. Like, how are you working it out? Like, does working it out mean you're not sleeping? Does it mean that you have 3 jobs and you're, strategizing, feeling overwhelmed? Does working it out feel like you have a lot of support and people helping you, and so you're working it out because you have a team? Like, operationalizing the way that people speak and not assuming that a really confident presentation and I can handle it presentation means that they don't need support. And so I feel like people really miss opportunity to support Black women, because we often show up very strong and contained. And that doesn't mean that we are not still struggling and still need support and need people to actually walk through ways that we could get more support for ourselves, even though it may not come off that way. And I think, just that sort of dominant social paradigm perspective versus the way we show up in the world is one challenge. When we do have challenges, I see a decent amount of a similarity between people saying that they're feeling depression and feeling anxiety and various types of anxieties. And I think, in the general mental health field, particularly around perinatal health, people think of postpartum depression more often, but anxiety, and especially anxiety during pregnancy, is as common as depression during pregnancy. And so, for one, not waiting until the person's had the baby to assess and figure out if they need help, really looking during pregnancy and in those early stages to see if both depression or anxiety or both are showing up, and how they're needing to be supported in that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because we were talking in the first hour about how postpartum is considered synonymous with postpartum depression. So there's even been this whole thing on I'm so distracted. My kid is jumping on this table that I don't want him jumping on, but I don't want to yell. But the idea that this, I really don't want to get into specifics of this like social media post, but they mentioning how postpartum is not real.
Mm.
And they're misconstruing postpartum depression with the term just postpartum, because postpartum is after birth. It is real. It's
Right.
completely real. But also postpartum depression is a real thing
Also,
as well.
yeah.
And then there's the different types of postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, postpartum. There's all these different things that affect people. So I'm glad you brought that up as well. I don't know if you have any kind of what do they call? It's in our thing here. Oh man, I lost my train of thought. Key points, like signs for these things that people can look out for. Because you mentioned even in pregnancy, are there any signs that medical professionals miss, or as community people within the work that doing the work that we can look out for if one of our friends or family members or anybody in our community is experiencing these things?
Definitely. I would say the first thing, and this is, so as one of the things that I do as a psychologist and having been a supervisor, when I'm working with the supervisee, and so of course doulas and lactation folks and birth workers are not necessarily clinicians, but I'm going to give you this concept that I think is useful for anybody. When they are working with a client and they're like, I'm not really sure if this is like clinically significant, if they really need help, or if they, like, is this normal? I always want to know, how did you feel after the session? Like if you were with this person and they were really, slow talking and you at the end of it, you felt really drained and you felt tired and exhausted, but you hadn't started off the session like that, that can indicate that person actually is dealing with depression, because if something happens in the relationship with human beings where we pick up on the energy that people are putting out, especially when they're significantly experiencing something that's off of sort of the general, like where you could go by and not really notice, right? When we start to notice and pick up on things, that intuition, that natural human nonverbal communication intelligence is really actually clinically helpful for people who work in the field. Same thing if a person has anxiety, I'm like, well, how did you feel after the session? Like, did you feel like, man, I don't know what to do. I just feel like right now I need to call every single person I know that can help the person, because I don't know, like, did you feel overwhelmed by what was happening? Because sometimes you take that on a little bit. And so I would say to families and birth workers, and folks that are helping, just how do you feel when you're with them? Like when you leave, while you're there, like, does it change your mood, and in what direction? And that can maybe give you an indication of a little bit of what they're feeling that actually is like crying for something. And then if you're feeling like you don't want to leave them, that always concerns me. Like if like the doulas will mention, when we're like, doing mentorship, talks or calls, and they say, I don't know, I feel like I need to go back another 2 or 3 times. Like, I don't think they're going to be able to really like survive without me. And it's like, tell me why. Because yes, like a lot of times, like, a mom is struggling with breastfeeding, or, they've got a lot going on. You want to be supportive, but then there's this other thing that can come on when you actually feel it's like a warning sign. Like, I don't think that they're doing okay without me. Moreover, if family members are saying that, right? If they're like the husband or the partner or the grandmother is like, I don't know if we could leave her. Like if this, and so then I would ask the question to myself or to that person, what do you think would happen if you left? Like, let's just say she had to do this all by herself, which is not a natural condition. Like the fact that we are doing a lot of things by ourselves is why we struggle so much in America in the postpartum period. But what do you think is the worst thing that would happen? That's a very telling thing. Like, allow yourself to think about that. And if anything alarming rises, then that person does need support, or you really need to address that with someone that has the full capacity to support them in that way. Because people are often afraid to think about like, well, I don't want to say that. I mean, you wouldn't want to, well, just go ahead. Because if it wasn't that, you would never say that. For somebody who you feel like they've got it, yeah, she's having to struggle, but I know she's going to get through it. She'll call me if she needs something, right? Like that's a really functional person that you're working with, and you feel like they have the communication skills and the coping to be able to communicate if they have a problem. But when you feel like I might need to ask more questions, or I don't know, I think maybe she's not telling me everything, that's a sign. That's a really normal, natural, and good indication that there is an opportunity to support and to ask more questions.
That makes me think of whenever I see in the news and stuff people who have harmed their children, like what were the signs of what family missed out on, or whatnot. What were you gonna say, Julie?
And I really appreciate you saying that, because I'm just thinking about, even in our chocolate milk cafe meetings, that's a good thing for us to even talk about.
Mm-hmm.
How are we feeling as peer supporters when, someone has been releasing during the meeting, and who can we connect her to in the meeting? And Zoom is so weird, just for sharing information. But I think that could be a really good check-in for us to start talking about in Chocolate Milk Cafe. How do we check out? How are we checking out, and then checking back in with people who need a little more touch.
Yeah, I like those tips because those signs were like, oh, I've been on both ends of those situations. Like I know, you come in a room, you're like, oh, I know I just set the mood for this space. So like being able to understand that is a good one. And I like that that's something that's accessible to like, all of us.
I would say too, making sure that people have like that they have like, so in your instance where you have like the chocolate milk cafe or people who actually are in active relationship with clients, get your tool belt and your kit and the referrals like in advance, like have them in your pocket, because then that makes you feel more confident to be able to say, hey, how you really doing? Because you almost don't want to say it if you can't help, and that's normal, right? And a lot of us are not trained in a way where we're supposed to be helping with, in an emergency situation. We're talking about sort of even within like normal limits. If a person is extremely distressed, if they are constantly crying all the time, if they are feeling fear and anxiety and like paranoia about things that doesn't seem rational, if they say that they feel afraid that they're going to hurt themselves or that they're a bad mother, that can be normal, right? To feel like, I don't know if I'm a good enough mother. They could be fixated on a particular thing that they thought they should have been able to do well and they're not doing it well, and that could be normal. But that's also an opportunity to ask questions like, what do you mean by that? Like how, is it that you feel like you need more support in that? So an example of anxiety where you're a little bit past the point where they're able to sort of manage it on their own is, let's say you're a support person and you're saying, okay, well, you feel like you're afraid you're not feeding your baby enough, for instance, like I feel anxious, I'm not sure, I want to keep going and ask the doctor about the baby's weight. Can I get my own scale? Let's say that they're kind of fixated on that. There may be a real reason. Maybe they know a baby that was, undernourished, that had challenges. Maybe they heard that their mother had issues feeding them, and so they think that they're going to have those issues, something. But let's say you provide all the resources for that. Okay, we're going to weigh the baby, or you go down to the WIC clinic or whatever it is, and the doctor said it's this is within normal limits, but then they're still fixated on it even after a solution has been provided. And then maybe that they're convinced it's resolved because everybody's like, there's nothing wrong with your baby, everything's okay. Then the next conversation is something else they're really fixated on, like the anxiety can jump to another topic. Then you're dealing with a anxiety disorder versus just a situational anxiety, which is within normal limits, because having a baby is an experience that causes and often can create some anxiety for folks for moments in time, but it shouldn't last beyond the moment where it's relevant to what's happening. And that's the same thing, with the depression and sadness. People could feel, sad that they have a mother that had passed away. And so now they had a baby and the mom's not there and they're really grieving at that time. And that could be a normal amount of distress that isn't depression. And then you could have, a situation where they're having a lot of mood swings in the beginning, in the first couple of weeks, as their body's adjusting to the hormones. But 6 weeks in, they shouldn't still be having that kind of volatility in their mood. And so also having a sense of, those first 3 weeks, after the placenta detaches, and you guys may have talked about this, there's a huge, chemical shifts that happens in the body that starts the reactions for breast milk to come. It starts reaction for all the things to happen. But one of the things that happens is that could feel very emotional and very vacillating for an individual. But that's a period of time. If you just imagine, by the time you finish bleeding, which should be within those first like 3 weeks or so, that process of the immediacy of that is sort of resolved. And so after 3 weeks, if you're still having a lot of volatility, we're kind of looking away from like baby blues, where it's like just a lot of strong emotion, but everything is tolerable. And even if it feels distressing, there's people around, versus this is just an ongoing state. But the other thing that I think people don't think about is that people who have a really hard time. So, and like there was a suicide committee that I was on in California where we reviewed cases of individuals who had taken their life while they were pregnant or in the postpartum period up to a year. The group that we looked at who actually, had, we would say like the worst outcome with, perinatal mood disorder, it really showed up in the second half of the year. So like 6 months after the baby, we had a significant number of people that took their life in that stage. So a lot of times people are just looking at those early stages, right? 6 weeks in, you're doing your last check. I hope everything's well. Looks like you're doing good. But you would miss a significant amount of people who may not do well 3 months out, 6 months out, 9 months out, up to a year. We had people in that suicide cohort. And many of us thought we wish the researchers would have pulled to 18 months and we could see if there were any pregnancy related suicides, even because of so much that could happen, in the course of that's related to pregnancy and postpartum. So, just don't forget people, after all the fun stuff is good and the new pictures are taken and everybody, is welcome baby in and, she's not bleeding anymore and everybody says she should be off to running and she's starting to look like she used to. The body and the hormones, especially if she's breastfeeding, whoever, is in that process, they could still be struggling with things that are unresolved for a while if they are.
And I was going to say, not to cause alarm or anything, because we talked about weaning and stuff, but 6 months is a common time for people to wean, go back to work and do all it. So, and I'm not saying there's a correlation and causation or anything, but I'm saying that there is something there to speak to, like, because we mentioned in our last hour about the, side effects of weaning, and full-term nursing is usually about 1 or 2 years. So if you're weaning beyond early because you're forced to,
right, and
you're already experiencing some issues and you have a drop in that, why do I keep forgetting the name of the oxytocin or whatever, so those things are connected in
they
some
can
way.
impact. Yeah. And it just, so you just I always want people, when we're thinking about supporting or taking care of our family or thinking about how to prepare ourselves, think about the points where support is essential, right? Like that you don't have, I think all support across the board would be essential, but they're really during the weaning time, during the early breastfeeding period, during the whole pregnancy, during those first, weeks where you're physically not at your full capacity to really get up and do, and that you need nutrition and you need to rest. Your womb needs to close. It needs you not to be walking around, shaking up. So, the placenta, my midwife had to really give me a visual because I was very busy. I was in grad school and I was having my girls. And I was younger. I was in my 20s. I had a lot of energy and they were like, I don't care. You have to sit down. Right. And so they were like, the placenta was attached to the wall and it ripped off and there's a whole scab there bleeding. And every time you walk, every time you get up, every time you do some dishes, every time you just do a little bit more laundry, every time you do one more thing, you pick the toddler up when you're supposed to be sitting down, you're literally doing this to that wound and it's not going to heal. So they're like, so I bled my first baby, I bled for 3 months, which is very abnormal. And somebody way earlier than that should have been like, this is terrible. And it was when I kind of got back into talking to the midwives about what was going on, where they were like, oh, no, your way should have been done. Like there's a problem, you have to stop immediately. And so we don't think about, people need support at that time to be able to lay down and sit down for 40 days, which is, like the ancestral tradition. And as much as that can be possible, make it possible for you during those times, because that does impact the mental state when your body is tasked to its full capacity. And then you still psychologically have to get yourself up when you're tired. You're actually using your emotional power and your willpower to do things physically when you don't actually have the full energy to do it. And that takes from you. And also the nutrition deprivation can cause mental illness. Sleep deprivation causes mental catastrophes for those that have ever had to do night shifts and have lost sleep. Sleep deprivation is a type of torture in military. I mean, it's a very serious thing. And that's a common state of motherhood and parenting is sleep deprivation. So what can we do to make sure that people get sleep so that they don't fall into dangerous cycles as well?
Yeah, that's sleep deprivation.
And that just reminds me of the whole conversation about which type of feeder gets the most rest. Do you get less rest when you're body feeding, or do you get more, can the
I
father feed?
argue, listening to mothers, that bottle feed, that they get the least amount of rest.
Well,
Unless they have a helper.
yeah.
Unless if they are doing it themselves, like just the standalone, who's doing it themselves, I've watched people be really surprised that they got less sleep than they thought they were going to get doing the bottle.
I was gonna say, because for me, even like if you're pumping specifically, I don't know about people who are providing formula, although you still have to prepare those, but you have to get up. It's breast lactation is an output input, a supply and demand process. You can pump as much as you want throughout the day and be an oversupplier and have milk set up. But if you want to keep that supply going, you still have to do some of that at night. So even if you have someone who's going to feed the baby for you, you still have to be part of that process. So I would argue, because at least if I'm, nursing from the tap or whatever, when that baby's going to sleep, I'm probably going to sleep with them. And we're going to be on the same path. But if you're, you have to pump, that's why I'm sure plenty of pumpers find a rhythm and they figure it out and they make up where they can or whatever. But as someone who had twins, and they were on same schedule and sometimes not same schedule or whatever, there was a lot of up and down, and it was having to pump when they were done, and when they were asleep, now I'm up pumping to empty my breasts or whatever. So that was never my jam. But I could see that being a little more, taxing on you.
Much empathy to our pumpers out there. For all the stages where I had to pump, I felt it was the most brutal part of the process. And it's amazing to me that people are able to maintain pumping schedule, especially most of the time it's because they have to. Yeah. Much respect. It's true dedication, because it is just, I found that it was much easier to just nurse. And so when I had to pump, I did night shifts in the psych hospital at a certain point, especially when my second one was born. And so I would be up all day breastfeeding, and then I'd pump. I don't even remember where I'd find time to pump at some point. So she'd have a meal while I was in the night shift and then come back home and nurse again. I basically never slept for a couple years. But it was hard. And I really empathize for that experience.
That's even why I know we're not into the conversation about co-sleeping or whatever, but that's why I became team co-sleeping, because getting the baby out of
everywhere you can minimize having to do one more thing is like the cutting the corner of, that even if they have like the little co-sleeper that's in the bed versus the one that's next to the bed that's a little lower. I'm like, people are like, which one's better? I'm like, the one that you have to lift them the least amount, like the one that you could just sort of roll over onto, versus having to pick up anything you could do, because every time you have to interrupt your sleep cycle, you feel it. And if you can minimize it.
I am so full. Like I don't even know what to ask, because I'm like, this is great between you coming on, and I know my sister LaShonda was on a little earlier. She wanted to stay on, but her phone was dying, so she wanted to come back. But I know we do have other questions, but I don't know, Jillian. What do you think? Do you want to react to anything?
I'd love for us to touch on the question about loss. Like, how do we support families who've experienced loss, not just infant loss, but maternal loss? Because I do feel like that part of the discussion when it comes to maternal mental health, we're only talking about the birthing person, right? And a lot of times we miss the family or the baby even. So can you just touch on that a little bit?
Before you get into that, I was going to say, you bring up we talked about it, that Kevin Hart fatherhood, which I am going to say this again publicly, because I know other people are like, that it had such an opportunity to really highlight that Black maternal mental health and Black maternal health loss, and how like families struggle with the loss. So I like that Jillian really, because I was trying to figure out if we should ask that or whatever. But yeah, that part of it, like, because even when we talk about postpartum depression, spouses, partners, family, like they can experience those things as well. We just forget that part. So yeah, I would like to hear more.
Definitely. I mean, I think, all of this is really bringing to the point that when you're supporting I say a birthing family, you're supporting the birthing family, all the people that are contributing to this birthing experience, right? And I mean, so even like when I use the term birthing people, I use it a lot of times in a gender inclusive way, but also because I think it describes what's happening. Like, like you are a birthing person in a birthing family, and there's an entire scenario that's going to impact everybody in that cipher. And so if you have someone who's dealing with postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety or any version, and obviously then if we get to a place where there's maternal loss, either through physical loss, through a medical condition or mishap at the hospital or whatever it is, or a psychological one through to suicide, you have to be supporting the birthing person's partner and their family and those immediate people that are a part of that life, because the people who they're waking up to, the people who we're saying, well, somebody needs to give them nutrition, somebody needs to give them a break. Who is that somebody? It's the people living with them, and it's the partner. And so we don't think about what they need to be supported, what kind of education that they need, even in the beginning of the course of the pregnancy. It alarms me so greatly, because I have worked as a psychologist with families and in systems. And when you work with an individual and you don't think about the rest of the family, I know that you can't really have true effectiveness in the healing and the therapy, because a big part of that dyad or that triad is missing in the treatment, right? And so let's see, if you have the loss of a mother, the first thing I think about, just like when I think about working with people in their own mental illness and challenges, is what are the practical things that they need, and how do we, provide that? So, postpartum doulas out there thinking about providing postpartum doula services to fathers and to partners who have lost, a mother, and really advertising those services so that people know you're there for them as well, right? And we often we're not asked to be in that capacity, but there is a need. And as we know in our community, if we have, these high disparities in Black maternal health, and Black maternal mortality and infant mortality, who's taking care of the baby after the maternal mortality happens, and who's taking care of the family and the partner and helping them strategize all of these new things the way we would have with the birthing person. So I think it is, all the services that we would have provided to the mother or the birthing person, we need to be thinking about providing to the partners as well. But also the effect that it has to have a person that has, significant mental health challenges that is in your everyday life. You can have subsequent depression as a result. But there also could have been situations that were related to why that first person had, mental health challenges that are also connected to this individual, because people tend to be experiencing similar things when they're living together and in life together. And so when you do assessments on mental health, don't just do it on the individual who's birthing, do it also on the partner or on the people who are their main support people. And not to say you would do a whole mental health assessment on the best friend, let's say, that's going to help. But if this best friend also lives in the house with them, if they're going to be there for the birth, they're going to be there for the postpartum period, if they're going to be taking care of their children, you definitely want to know, where are you going to get your support to do this support role? Because just like it's a tasking thing. And I think there's more coming into the research and into, sort of community focused help, thinking about the caregiver. And I think that should be included in maternal health, even though we often don't think of the partner as a caregiver. But in many ways, especially if there's a demise, if there's a loss, they are the immediate person, and they were often not expecting it. And they are now grieving and having to caretake, which is unfair. I mean, it's like, people should get to grieve on their own in their own time, but you don't get to do that when you have to also take care of children. And we, as mothers and birthing people, experience that because the world often gives us no mercy. They just expect you to get up, cut up or not, ripped or not, having had a long birth or not, and take care of everybody and clean your house and do all the things and make sure that the partners are all taken care of. And so, and in a lot of ways, we know that burden, and we also have to think about that for the partners as well. Some of the things that I think of, like on a specific level, I've listened to, I try to listen out for, stories of, particularly of the fathers who have received their children after the loss of their partner, and what did they go through? What did they wish they had? And there was even within the systems, there wasn't a thought other than, here's your baby, right? Like, and I think, Kevin Hart shows that in the fatherhood moment where they hand him his baby and he's like, it's like, is that the way you would have treated somebody where there wasn't a baby if their partner had died? Right? Like, we don't even think about it, because in parenting, it somehow overrides normal human care for each other, which is really unfortunate. But that is the way our systems are in this nation. They're not thinking about how to care for people in that way. And so us thinking about how to do that for ourselves and the community as well, I think is really important. And I think I would love, and I know that this is happening with Kira Johnson's, husband, and a number of men who are out there talking about what they needed, but the opportunity for more men, fathers, and partners to say what they would have needed. Because just like we do assessment with birthing people to see, what do the doulas need to offer you? What does the hospital need to offer you? We need to hear from them what they would have needed, because there are things that we would never have considered being outside of that experience. So the lived experience really matters. So if we have the chance to do listening psych sessions, if we have a chance to sit at workshops and webinars where they're talking, it's really valuable. And there are a number of men who are leading in that. And I say men because those are the ones that I've seen come out. I haven't seen any queer partners come out in that kind of public way where they're talking about the loss of their partner. I'm sure it's there. And as we see them, we should be sharing them among each other, because some voices, as we know, have to be lifted up. They're not popular and in public in the same ways, but we all want to be able to serve everybody, and so it's like, I was talking to somebody the other day about, there are certain parts of the community that you just have to strategize how to make sure that everybody hears their voice too, because they otherwise won't hear them. And that's also with people with disabilities who are often not heard in the community. I have a friend who I grew up with, and her mother was deaf. And so as a child, my best friend's mother was deaf. And so I had this experience of a person that's deaf. And I learned so much about what that would mean. Just going with them to the store, just, trying to get in the house, and the doorbell has a light and it blinks. And I know that, because I would be like, how do you let me in? How'd you hear the doorbell? But things that you would, if you don't have that lived experience, you wouldn't know. But what does that look like in the birth world? Like, what does that look like supporting, families who would have different needs that you might not consider? And so having, I think, really an opportunity to hear what they would say about what they need would be really valuable.
I'm so happy you brought that up, because inclusivity is like our jam over here.
Yes, and I
but
love
getting
that.
there, but getting
I
there
love
is the
that.
challenge, right? You don't want to
It is.
tokenize people. You
Yeah.
want to meet them. We said this earlier, meet them where they are and everything. And it's just really, getting to that point, because a lot of people have been harmed, especially in our community, especially for queer people. We find that trans people in the community don't necessarily trust the Black centered spaces, because
they're like, am I safe here? I don't know. Is this like a old school Black space or a new school Black space? It's like,
exactly.
And we have to, and I think that's fair. And that's the opportunity for those of us that have organizations and are in spaces as much as possible to make it clear whether or not you're in an inclusive space. And we can't assume that, unfortunately. And just like we can't assume that in white space that they've thought of us and that we're being included, and that they're going to, work with us without the biases that we experience in the general, like sort of racist world. We also know that there's those within every community is its own situation. And, when I always talk about implicit bias, I'm like, really not wanting people to think this is just about white people and everybody else. This is about everybody and everybody else, right? And so we have to see where our gaps are, where our limitations are, and all of us are going to have it. I mean, I sit in queer space having conversations and watch people arguing among themselves about, is this person queer enough to represent the queer community? Is this person, because within community, you have your own issues, right? And everybody's got issues within their own community. And so, just giving a lot of mercy for each other for when people are trying and they maybe fall short, of the glory, but also people to be more intentional about exposing themselves to things that they wouldn't otherwise. But I think we have to know that without access to a diverse community, you don't have enough experience. And I see that, as a need for our community, as any community, unless like I'm in California, you guys are in, the East Coast, and all in between the rest of the nation, people are having different experiences in their Black community, right? And so we can't assume that people would have had any experience with the diversity that we see even in other parts, or the conversations that we're having. But I love that you create a brave space to have those conversations here. I love the social media messaging. I've seen a lot of your intentionality around that, and I've been actually sharing it with folks who are like, well, how do we talk about this in a way, or how do we have representation? I was with a group, we were talking about just marketing, in the maternal health space and making sure that there's inclusivity. And there was this conversation about like, well, if you would want to show more inclusivity, especially, on the queer spectrums and the LGBT community, but where's the pictures for that? Like how would you find real live images to show, yes, we're inclusive, if those don't exist on a pixel and an Unsplash? And what would that mean to then go and look for people to take pictures, right? Now you're like voyeuristic. So really just thinking about like, we have a practical challenge, even when people want to be inclusive, but then also an opportunity. And so everybody just doing the best that they can do and trying to do the best that they can do.
Yeah, we don't want to tokenize people. I was going to say when you were talking before, the other challenge is not being at a one-on-one. I am, as a marginalized person, I'm so over having to educate the other people in the room, and we need degrees and levels to things. Like some of the podcasts I listen to, I love listening to Black joy and Black experiences at different levels. Like I would like to hear about trans people's issues with dating. Like I'm tired of just hearing about like, stop killing us. Like we need, like, no, that's a valid still, but like, what's the other conversation? They are human beings and live lives. So yes,
absolutely.
I agree. And it's been a challenge. We've been working on that. I've been struggling with that for the last year as Chocolate Milk Cafe, of getting that diversity. So we hooked up with birth nerds and was like, can you make us some images? Let's start there. So now
and that's the thing. But I saw that and I appreciate that, even if you have to start with graphics, then it's there and it's where you can start. And just inviting.
Yeah. Sorry.
No. Just inviting, any opportunity to I'm going to say to just have it in the space. I want to say showcase, but that's not the word I want to use because it sounds tokening, but to really to highlight and to bring forth, all the parts of the community. It is so valuable. And I'm always just
authentically support. Like it has to be an authentic process.
Yeah.
So
it does.
As we're working and growing in that space, I know for me, the language is still challenging for me, but I have to let it be known that it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, can I say this? But we try and be intentional about having the space be welcoming.
Right. Absolutely.
So while we're talking, we did say at 7:00 we were going to open up a little bit to Q&A. We have least one person that I know has a question that I am going to let them into the room and see if they are still available, because people have been waiting in here for a while. They missed my memo on some things, so we'll see how this goes. We'll start with one. This is new for us, this new format of like trying to bring people into the space. Oh no, she didn't pop up. Okay, let's see if this other person, I don't see, but I can actually ask the question. Like I have the questions, so we can still explore it.
Yeah, we can do it that way.
Because it's hard, I guess, to stay on a conversation like thing, and also, it's on Facebook and you're trying to check your email. It's all, we're learning.
Yes. I don't know how you're doing it.
I have dual screens and my phone, and I'm getting text messages and emails, and I'm just like, well, let's see what I can pay attention to. But luckily, there's a lot going on here that I don't have to be as entertained involved in.
But I have another question though. Yeah. Sorry, because I want to make sure we don't forget about the new providers, because I do feel like sometimes when new providers, whether it's in education, mental health, or whatever, it's like, what classes do I take to make sure that I am covering whatever? What would you recommend for a new mental health professional, somebody who's even still in school? What should we be looking for in order to be able to support Black maternal mental health?
Oh, that's a good question. So, I love that you said that, there's so much new things coming out and there's so many, I would say find as much as possible space to engage in the conversations in Black space where we're having conversations, because some of it is going to come from the current everyday lived reaction to what's happening in our community. And so we bring up a webinar, we have, a roundtable discussion, and you need to be tuned into the community in some ways. And so just Black Mamas Matter Alliance, will have conversations. Black Women Birthing Justice will often have conversations. Black Women Breastfeeding out of Detroit does a lot of, really, they do a really good conference where they bring up a lot of topics. And I say Black Mamas Matter Alliance because now that like leads you into all the organizations around the nation that, or not all, but a good number of them, hundreds that are Black women led and in conversations where they're will be, and because BMMA is, we all try to be mindful to bring in, even if our specific focus isn't maternal mental health, which is not the majority, but to be considerate of all the aspects of wellness, right, for our community. And so tuning into what people are saying live, not just in classes, but there are practical, maternal mental health like trainings that you could do, where they are, and I've seen this with Postpartum Support International, Maternal Mental Health Now. They have training organizations on perinatal mental health for birth workers and other people in the greater field of maternal health, and like sort of the support team around that, that are looking at culturally competent conversations. And so where they're bringing in aspects of the training that will speak to specific issues of population. So that's not going to be just Black exclusive. It's going to be, kind of more diverse, but they're being mindful and conscientious about bringing in conversation on Black maternal health specifically. Definitely, there's another organization, Mom Congress, 2020 Mom, that does a lot of engagement with Shades of Blue as well. And so as we're talking about like maternal mental health space, for Black women in particular, Shades of Blue, you must know Shades of Blue. If you don't, please stay tuned to Kay and all the work that she does with her organization, because she does a lot of collaboration with other organizations where they're bringing in a very specific lens to Black maternal health. And so she's done a lot of work with 2020 Mom, which is where I was mentioning that. Yeah, and I mean, I would say though those would be the main aspects. I mean, if you wanted formal training, you could do formal perinatal support training. But I think if you're not tuned into the conversations that Black women are having in organizations about Black maternal health, you might only learn, particulars about things, but not the nuances of what's happening in the current experience. And you want to have practical stories. You don't want to just leave it to conceptual ideas. And so one of the things that could be helpful, even as a starting point, is the Battling Over Birth report, which Black Women Birth and Justice came out with, has segments on maternal mental health. And the Black women in the study, it was 100 Black women discussing their experiences in maternal health in California in 2018, and it came out. But they talk about their experiences with mental health, and there are really powerful stories in that executive summary, but also in the full book, which you can get on Amazon, you can get on the website. It's very affordable. I want to say the book is $20. Like, we intentionally made it affordable. You said it is, Jillian, so that it could be affordable for the community ongoing. And you can actually read the stories that people experience and what they would have preferred their providers to do, how they felt about things. It will give you a really good sense as a provider, all types of providers, mental health, nursing, doula, lactation, or otherwise, of what people experience, and how your mind will make you think to yourself, how could I have done differently with that? Like, what would I have said if they had said that to me? So I think practical stories, I wish we could have more people just on YouTube and social media, just telling their stories in the Black community so that we could hear it. But there are organizations that have sort of published it in that way.
That's helpful.
I'm like, I heard you say something, Jillian,
but so much. I wish I had the.
I think that's helpful. Oh, Takesha, you go.
I was just saying, I wish we had the book. I wish I had the book right next to me to pull up the Black. The Black.
I might. Let me see if I can find it.
It's on my shelf behind me, and I just can't remember which one it's in.
I know. I just moved all my stuff, and it was always right here next to me.
We love that book. That version.
We'll put it in the thread, Takesha. You can put it in the Facebook thread.
Yeah, I'll find the Battling Over Birth report.
Something else for you to do.
Oh, well, Shonda already posted the journal, but she did on the Chocolate Milk Cafe. So I'm like, that's not me, but that's, she said. I also wanted to plug, because since you mentioned Kay is awesome. And this is Kay. I did mention that this is her baby, Black Maternal Mental Health Week. I love that it's like kicking off. So you can also find Dr. Sayida on is it Wednesday? Hold on, wait. I pulled it up. I went looking for it.
Oh, I think it's Wednesday.
The 22nd?
Yeah.
State of Black Maternal Mental Health Roundtable. So Dr. Sayida will be joining a bunch of people.
A bunch of amazing folks to have a conversation. I know. I was excited. I mean, I just got asked, and then I was like, oh, I'm going to have this. This is going to be great. This is really
I'm excited
awesome
for that. There's a lot of stuff going on for that. Mm-hmm. So you can find her there as well. There's just so much going on. Kay is doing a great job. I think the being in the pandemic where things can be virtual is a blessing and a little bit of a challenge. So it's good to see that she's making it work. I have
Absolutely.
a lot of faith in her, and their website is back up and it's the bomb. So
Yes.
yeah, definitely check that out.
Absolutely.
The question I wanted that the person that I was trying to bring into the room was going to ask here it basically is like, does postpartum depression happen mainly to women or people who have suffered depression in the past? So I don't
Oh,
know if
that's a
we
good
actually
question.
within the conversation we had addressed it that way. So yeah,
No, yeah, that's a great question. So there is, and without having, you know, the statistics in front of me, I want to say about um, a good amount of people, I want to say it's about 20%, at least 20% or more of people who experience postpartum depression had experienced a prior depression in general or have had mental health challenges in advance. So we do consider having mental health history a risk for having postpartum depression and other perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. However, as a therapist and also as a doula who is like working with an individual client and I'm wanting them to not feel anxious and scared for themselves, right? I want people to conceptualize this as if you have had, you know, a previous, you know, mood disorder, if it was resolved and let's say healed and there was, you know, resolution and you have a really high functioning, whatever skills you would use to support that, you may need to employ those skills as you have this new stressful scenario, pregnancy and a postpartum period arising. And it may be an opportunity for folks around you to be more supportive because there could be a vulnerability there, given that you had a vulnerability in the past. But you also overcame it, right? And so I feel like people who were able to resolve past mental health should feel like they have something under their belt that gives them the tools to be able to do it again should they have challenges. At the same time, if you have an unresolved you know, mental health condition coming into pregnancy, I would generally assume this is about to be a little bit more stressful and you're potentially going to have more vulnerability here because you were already feeling unstable for whatever reasons, and now you're creating physical, emotional, spiritual, psychological, environmental changes into that life. And so again, a really strong opportunity for support and then really active treatment at that point if people weren't already, you know, in some kind of robust treatment plan. And so yes, it can have an impact, but it is not at all only for people who had a past mental health. When you think of, I would say, what I'm going to call like an organic, like physical, physiological, chemical perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. So not a circumstantial upset based on the changes and adjustment, but of the actual chemical alterations of the body causing you to spiral into a mental health concern as a physiological thing that typically then would need, you know, often like medication or really strong set of nutritional planning around resolving. You know, that individual is experiencing something that isn't conditional to the circumstance. It's like a physiological experience that they're having. And a good majority of people, or a lot of people who experience perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, it's a chemical imbalance that's happening due to pregnancy and the postpartum period. And so that's something also to throw in there as you're thinking about people who could experience it, as people who just are sort of unfortunately prone to have this imbalance happen. And what we actually find is that people who have like really strong PMS, really strong mood swings during their periods, they also tend to have a higher risk of having perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And it tells us that there's a chemical imbalance and a really strong reaction to the changes in their hormones. And so that's another sort of risk factor or something to be thinking about. If you have really strong mood changes during, you know, your menstrual cycle, or, you know, you're working with someone who does, or you're working with people, you want to kind of know that, because that might give you an indication if they're going to have a hard time emotionally as they cycle into a new volatile, I don't say volatile in a bad way, but moving hormonal cycle. And so those are some things to think about as well.
that's interesting you bring that up as somebody who experienced horrible
You sound really low to me,
menstrual.
Takesha.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a little speaker issue that sometimes comes up in there, but I don't know how you feel about this, but I found when I was with my twins, when I had those kind of experiences, um, what are they called? Damn it, I had the word.
Is it a nutritional supplement? What do you think?
No, the pills,
Birth control?
no, ooh. Placenta pills. Okay.
Okay, there we go.
Placenta encapsulation, like the hormones that were in the placenta. When I had my pills encapsulated, and I know it's a crunchy thing. That's why I said I don't know how everyone feels about that, but I found a difference when I wanted to rip my husband's head off. If I took a placenta pill, that my hormones like kind of came down a little, and that was very interesting because it didn't happen with my first, but when I had my twins, it was like a big shift in like and like, so it's interesting that you are connecting that.
Well, that's why people use, a lot of people look to placenta encapsulation, as an option to help mitigate mood disorder. I mean, it's definitely a naturopath way of managing it that people find to be really helpful. Whether the scientific world wants to say that, people report that, and I've seen that consistently be reported to a point where I believe people when they say stuff. So I'm going to go with that. If people who had emotional challenges without placenta encapsulation option, and then used it and found it to be really helpful. So
I was like, I am mad today. Let me go take some of those. And I was like, oh, it actually helped me.
Calms down a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. And then I do have another question.
Before you go into the next question, Takesha, I do want to point out the time. I'm always looking at time. It is 7:30. So I don't know if people have to leave or.
I'm okay.
What did you say? Okay.
That's how she is on time. Okay. So Jillian, how are you on time? Because since you're in your car and you
practice is over around 8 something, so I'm good.
Okay, so there's only 2 more things on our list. It's mostly this other question is actually someone that knows Jillian that had submitted, can we offer 1 or 2 suggestions for an interested senior is how they phrased it, can get active in some way to support an individual or organization. So someone who I guess has now, we're not using the term grandfather, but legacy into like being able to now be part of the community in a different way, and they can show up and support. What kind of advice can we give them? Anybody? Jillian? Sayida?
Oh, I thought you were saying that question was to Jillian, so I almost wasn't even fully.
Oh, sorry. I meant
that question. Say it again. The person
that submitted it is a friend of Jillian's.
I see. Okay.
But
that's Jillian, my Aunt Shelly, and she's been coming to a lot of these talks, and she's always like, "What can I do?" First of all, it's always weird to hear her call herself a senior.
Oh, but like an elder. She's an elder in the community. Is that what you're saying?
She's an elder in the community, and she's always just like, well, what can I do to help? And she was very helpful in my process. When I had my second child, I moved across country, nursing 2 kids in a whole bit, and she was very helpful for me. And she's constantly trying to figure out what can I do to help individuals who need help in the birthing space?
Oh, well, no, I mean, I could make some suggestions there. So there was there's a group of, they call themselves grandmothers in Los Angeles that I've heard a number of them talk about wanting to train as doulas to be able to provide support because they're retired and they have already birthed kids or seen grandkids be birthed, and just they're available in many ways. And so I would say, there's a huge need for postpartum care and support for, birthing people. And so letting people know that I'm available to come by and cook for you, to, hold the baby while you nap after you've nursed the baby, to pick the toddlers up from school so you could just have one more nap in and not have to get up again. I mean, there are so many things that people need, and to have people in the community that have time. I mean, people just don't have time for them. Their parents don't have time for them. Their partners don't have time. Not that they don't want to, they're working. Most people are still working with their parents also working. And so we don't have a community a lot of Black spaces where there's a lot of people with time to support. And that's exactly what you need. You need actual time. So postpartum doula, is there overnight with folks and, and they're, for multiple hours of the day, really making sure that everybody has what they need. And that's not available to everybody. And so if you could be that person, that would be amazing. I'm sure for a lot of folks, and maybe putting together a bit of a package to say, this is what I could provide so that you have the boundaries that you need around what you actually could do comfortably, physically. That'd be amazing. And I would say, other than that, it would not hurt. And I think it'd be amazing to go to a formal doula training and to learn things that may not have been practiced back you know, in the time that you were birthing, or you have family members or around that age. Because what I see is a bit of a, there are like two versions where you have like elders in the generations that birth naturally and they're comfortable breastfeeding, and they're like, oh, you know, y'all should be doing this. And then, but a good amount of people, particularly in the Black community, because of the historical times and the generations where we are, came from a time where people were not birthing naturally. You know, some people, you know, grandparents and great grandparents coming up in the twilight era where they put you to sleep to have a baby. And so, and breastfeeding not really being an option because people were working and laboring, and it was also taboo, and people were bottle feeding, thinking that was better than breastfeeding back in that generation of a lot of people who are birthing now, grandparents. And so, yeah, you know, I don't know where that person falls in that state, but to know what's happening with the Black maternal health disparities, to know what the current day recommendations are, you know, within the community, and to be able to give some wisdom. I mean, I love having elders even in our doula trainings. We have a number of elders that are like, we want to learn from you, but then we're like, well, tell us what, you know, because you've been through multiple generations of people birthing, and not everybody, you know, there are skills about the process of caring for the family and the community that you learn over time, that are soft skills that have nothing to do with doulaing, but everything to do with doulaing. And so, you know, to don't underestimate the value that you bring to the work, and yeah, just do all the things.
I'll often tell her food is her jam. Food, I feel like, is her love language. And I'm like, that would work wonders for a family welcoming a new baby.
Absolutely.
She wants to come feed my
that
family
alone.
But that's a real service. So people who do postpartum nutrition, so ideally, you know, a 40-day meal for a person who just gave birth is everything. Yeah. You know, to be able to provide, even if you could provide 3 days of a week of meals for them, that would, because I'm telling you, those 3 days a week that they're not maybe getting the most nutritious food because they don't have time to cook it, and it's 3 days that they could get energy back to just be served and cared for and just feel held by a grandmother too in the community. And I mean, I don't know, practical grandmother or just elder, you know, in the community, but it could be beautiful. Yeah, just a postpartum nutritional service, you know, it'd be powerful.
I absolutely love this. I will do a plug of like our Yonkers facilitator Nubia Earth Martin does like a birth worker or birthing support person training, kind of like to decolonize the word doula. But I like that space that she does open it up to people who are family, but I never really thought about grandparents and whatever, because I also sit in a space that, you know, you do this birth work and sometimes people think that lactation, birth work, when we say peer-to-peer, needs to be someone who is birthed and needs someone who has kids, and it needs to be someone who has lactated. And I argue that our community is stronger when we have people who don't necessarily, because like I struggle with my little kids, dragging them all to an event and then also supporting somebody, but to have someone who doesn't have that, and even if they don't need it, like, but they like to be like an auntie in the community or a grandmother figure or whatever, being able to show up in that way and having a little more flexibility. So having that, I love this normalization of talking.
Absolutely. About. I mean, think of it like in our, you know, in the old generation, you know, how we survived, you know, at least my ancestry, you know, with a lot of folks that came from enslaved times, we had to create creative families. You know, children separated from parents meant that whoever could take care would do it. And sometimes that'd be the person who didn't have children, right? Because they'd be able to take on other people's kids. And I mean, I know that, you know, I used to be a foster mom, and I feel like just having come into that, what I consider like a ministry of like those that care for other people's children and like take them on in your own. There's a lot of things that you may not have ever have done, stages of child that you may not have ever had. You know, I took on teenage, you know, moms when I had little babies. I know nothing about raising a teenager, but you know, I was a teenager once and I love people and I'm a mama. And so, you know, I did the best I could. And that makes a huge difference. To just be able to have people who have the time and the availability and a new perspective, you know, those aunties and uncles and, you know, big mamas that are not the people who birthed you, you know, sometimes they have a different perspective than the people who are family and maybe, you know, even more empathy or more patience, you know, and so we need everybody. That's a lie if people think it needs to just be people who birth. My doula, who is amazing doula, have never given, you know, is not a mother herself to children, but was the most incredible and is the most incredible doula, one of the most incredible doulas that I know. And it's a spiritual calling.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm more sometimes being an auntie. Like I was so great before I had kids because I had more time to focus and all this stuff. Like now as a mom, I'm like, oh man, I suck as an auntie. I don't call them or do anything. Like I miss those days because it was easy. It was fun. You know, it was more engaged and was able to do a lot more babies, like sleep. We had what's it called, sleepovers or baking cookies and doing this stuff. I can still do it, but it's not the same. You know, because as a parent, you just weigh your thing. But yeah, what are you gonna say, Jillian? Because I was just gonna wrap up with the collective rest questions.
I was just gonna bring up Cece, the other North co-facilitator. She didn't breastfeed, but she's a great supporter. I think that one of the great things about Chocolate Milk Cafe is that it is peer to peer. So expertise is not needed, experience and desire is, and that just goes a really long way.
Yeah, we define peer to peer as you are a part of the African diaspora and you support lactation. The end.
That's
We
powerful.
don't.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
As they say in Botswana, full stop.
Love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we're just gonna talk about because we, like I said, Black Breastfeeding Week is our mecca here, so we like to center that in our discussions for lactating. Like, well, I don't want to really call it Black Lactation Week because it's not called that, but we know we support all Black lactating people of the African diaspora. But their theme this year is the Big Pause: Collective Rest for Collective Power. So we have been trying to talk about how we prioritize rest. So we want to. I know you kind of mentioned in the beginning, but we just want to circle back around to it and just ask you, Dr. Sayida, how do you prioritize rest? And if you want to dig in there of how you suggest other people prioritize rest, because there was a question in here about peace that I didn't ask, that just basically asked what are things that you do to reinstate your peace. So I feel like they might flow together.
Yeah, that flows. So definitely meditation. And to give more operational definition, I suggest for people progressive relaxation exercises because it's a physiological relaxation. So it goes with breathing and with physiological. So typically progressive relaxation is you tense some part of your body and then you relax and then you tense. And so you go through progressively each part of your body and you tense them, and some progressive relaxations can be so detailed. It's like, tense the top part of your finger, right? Just that, and then let it go. And then tense the next part so that you really come into, it's an embodiment exercise as well. But it really, when you can physically tense yourself and relax, the body, ignites a real physiological relaxation process that takes over your mind. So it gives you a little bit to focus on, and it actually does it for you without you having to be, okay, relax, you're right? Which is like, are you really gonna relax? Are you still thinking about stuff? But if it's like, squeeze your arm really, really tight, really, really tight, really, really tight, take a deep breath, now relax. Your body just relaxes. It doesn't, you don't have to like be in a relaxing mindset. You can get yourself there by the end. Really good at night to go to bed. I suggest it for pregnant folks, particularly because you get connected to your body, you get to notice where you have tension and then where you need to relax more on a regular basis. And so as you do that on a regular basis, like daily, you realize where you hold tension on a regular basis. Cause you're like, oh, wow, every time I do that, whoa, it's like huge difference. Like then it starts to make you more conscious on a regular basis. So I think that's super important to be aware of how much tension we hold in the body at any state of time. And so one of the practices that I do is something called segment intending. And so every time I go into a new segment, I try my best to like, just take a deep breath and like release that moment. So like when we get off this call, I'm going to like reset myself, like, all right, that was great. And moving into the next moment. And that just momentary pause actually lets the body know that it can stop holding whatever tensions that the conversation might have brought up. And it might not have been a bad thing. Like, oh, I want to remember to send Jillian the resource, right? But if I don't let it go on my body will sort of hold that like right here, right? And then by the end of the day, they'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm not supposed to do this, I'm not supposed to do that. And it's not just in my mind, it's actually in the body. And so just, giving my body and my mind an opportunity to say, we can let that go and we can come back to it. And then I would say I have like playlists for every mood that I could ever be in and a strategy to get myself feeling better. So I have like a playlist called anxiety. I have a playlist called, frustration. I have one called anger. And I have one like just, pick me up. and it's got like gospel music, it's got spiritual songs, it's got chants from all over the world. I'm a big sort of vibration sound person, so a lot of crystal bowls in there. I love Beautiful Chorus. Shout out to Beautiful Chorus. If you guys aren't familiar, the bomb, and you just throw on anything and it's going to get your mind right. And recently, I'll say the last thing is there's and I had never heard of her, so I think she's famous, and I'm terrible about famous people because I'm like so not always on pop culture stuff. Jaya Echo.
Janae Aiko.
Yes, thank you. Amazing singer. I only knew her as the person that sang this chant called Calm. And then they were like, no, that's a real artist. Like, she sings real songs. And I thought she just chanted because that's the only thing that I ever came in contact with. And then I was like, oh, I know those other songs. I didn't know who that was. But I'll give it to you and you can send it to people. But it's something. And basically the whole time she's like, calm down, lay down. It's like literally she's like telling you to like relax. And that thing, if I'm like just had a long, busy day and I'm like, I need to settle down. I feel like I can't settle down. I put it on and I feel it's like subliminal messaging. It's like slowly, I just talk a little slower and I like get a little relaxed and I either put myself to sleep. Sometimes I'll have it on when I'm in a lot of meetings all day on Zoom and I know that like I have to go, but I want some part of me to relax. So I have it in the background on my Bluetooth, like while I'm in meetings. I do a lot of keeping my mind focused on balance and calm and not letting that slip my awareness as much as possible. And just the intentionality of that keeps me pretty balanced.
Your playlist sounds lit.
It's amazing. I have the best playlist on the planet. I will share it with anyone. Yes, I will share.
It reminds me of Jillian and I did the Black course at the beginning of the year, and they kept playing. Oh my God, Tanifer had such great like music, and
yes, she did.
Yes,
Razi, I'm like, oh my God, I need to just listen.
Yes.
You just need to make a Blacklist playlist. Like, so now I need to just follow Sayida.
Okay, yeah, I think my playlists are public. So I'm gonna see how I can send you a playlist. Yeah.
What is it on Spotify?
On YouTube.
Okay.
YouTube.
No, YouTube. I appreciate that your rest notes were not necessarily sleep. Because I feel like when people hear rest, they only think about sleep.
Right.
Which I don't. Right. I'm like, you don't have to be sleeping to rest. Like that's not the only way for you to rest. Like, what does rest really mean? Yeah. So I really appreciate that.
That's the only way my brain.
I'm a body person.
Yeah, I like that. I like this reminder though. You two are good for that. Like that's why Jillian, we need to focus on how to teach other types of rest that for people, because for me, I go to sleep and once I wake up the way I wake up in the morning is my brain starts moving and I'm like, oh, I gotta go do stuff. So having people around that remind.
Well, yeah, I want to invite you to disallow yourself to do that. So like really to me, the moment you have the most control over everything, your whole day and the whole course of the trajectory of every moment from there is how you wake up and like what you decide you're going to focus on. And I have a really extensive morning spiritual practice. It's long and it's developed over many years, and you can find it hard pressed. The house has to be on fire for me to not do my practices, because that's how much I know it matters to like what my day is going to be like and what my life is. But if you don't have a long period of time or you haven't cultivated that, when you wake up and you're like, okay, well, all the things I need to do is like pause. Thank you for waking me up this morning. You know what I mean? Like, just like, look at that sun and be like, you're so beautiful today. Hi. You know, like, just like give yourself a moment to be present to like the now and the opportunity to be this whole being that is awake on the earth. Like, just go into gratitude for a little bit, just even if it's a moment, because what'll happen is then where you used to wake up, and I used to be like that. I woke up like, okay, I got this and I wake up in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, like, oh shoot. When I wake up at 6, I want to write down the things. I mean, it was madness. I was like full on, like, beast mode. But now you said what?
I relate.
But now I wake up and with a smile and I'm like, oh my gosh, good morning. Like, it's so ridiculous. Like I wake up like a baby wakes up, like when, like babies, not when they wake up crying, but they're like just happy looking around, like, and it's like everything is fine. Like, you could cultivate that and then decide, okay, now I'm going to come into my day and I'm going to get these things done, but I'm going to do it from a space like this, not like where you've lost almost all your energy when you kind of go like that. It's like you don't get to set it. So just set it. You deserve to set it.
I like this. My other big challenge, and we're not going to get into like life things, but like the kids wake up early and then they wake you up like I'm hungry, so
Yeah.
we're all just full. But
no,
that's being
so
mindful.
mommy hack is wake up before the kids. I hate to tell people that because it sounds terrible. It's like, really? So like 3:00 in the morning, but I learned that though, because I had an early riser and they want to get it, good morning, mommy. And it's like, and that messed me up because I lost I couldn't do my thing that I was, my thing. And so I had to make peace with, I have to get up before they get up. And so I'm up and full on everything done before anybody.
I don't know that life, so I'm
now
gonna
that's
have
okay.
to be more mindful.
But even if you just if you set your alarm for the time that you assume that they won't be up, just to wake yourself up and say, this is the moment I'm gonna set my day. I'm gonna just do some breathing. I'm gonna go back to sleep. But I already gave myself that moment. Like there's something about, I'll go back to sleep very often if there's nothing I have to do until 9, but I'm up at 6 because I need to be up before the world's looking for me, because it's on and popping. Once they start looking for me, it's over. I can't get it back. I've tried.
Yeah.
I can't
when
get
COVID
it back.
when COVID was rolling, and I decided to remove my children from school because it was just too stressful. And we got rid of the bedtime and they were staying up until, and my mother asked me a question, is that for them or is that for you?
Girl,
and I never thought about that, but it really was for me.
I let them stay up all hours of the night. I was like, oh, I get till 9 o'clock. Nobody's looking for me.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. Listen. I'm a night owl. My children, no matter what time they go to sleep, wake up the same time. So we're now in the house. They're like, why do we have such an early bedtime? And you and daddy get to stay up. I said, because we wake up late. You do not. Ever. And we need some kid-free time in our life because y'all are on. They wake up with the sun, no matter
How old are they?
Well, my oldest is 9, and he started doing this when he was like 5 or 6. So it wasn't like, because the nursing days, it was like, oh, he woke up, let's nurse, and he goes back.
Right, the nursing days, I got a plan for you. I'm going to put this in your mouth and you're going back to sleep. I don't care if you want to go back to sleep. You're going to go back to sleep. Oh, the power of nursing.
Oh, the sun is up. That must mean I must be up.
Yes, I have one of those. Mm-hmm.
And then they wake up. My daughter was sleeping, but the other 2 wake her up. So the sharing of the room kind of sucks too. Oh, eye mask for her though, by the way. If I can get my son in an eye mask, maybe that would work. I got my daughter in an eye mask so that her brothers don't bother her when she's trying to sleep and they want to turn on a light or whatever. But for me, it's the sound. Everybody wakes up hungry, so they come in the bedroom with the kick in the door and then tell you even though you're sleeping. So we'll work on that. But I like this idea. You all gave me some good ideas for mindfulness that I know I'm lacking these days. So
see, I just want you to have it.
Right. Start with the calm song. Just commit to starting your day with that song.
Ooh, that's good. Week. That's a good idea.
I'm holding you accountable, Takesha.
All right, I'm gonna try. And you were talking about the your phone thing. I have that. I don't listen to it. My phone goes off. I'll be on my phone anyway. My sister called me last night and I was like, how do you know I'm still up? It's 11:30. You're lucky because my phone is on do not disturb, but because I was on it, the phone call came through or whatever.
Right.
But, but this is great. And you help out some people in our Facebook like the playlist suggestions, and then they want you to share your calm down and lay down stuff. So please share that with us and we'll pass it along. And I don't want to end. We're almost at 8 o'clock, but I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, but since we do have to end, Takesha, how can people get in touch with you, Sayida? What's the best ways for people to get in touch with you, to follow you, to listen to your jams?
Organizations, name them too.
Yes, right. So let's see. I really don't engage actively on social media, but I have social media and I do put everything that I'm doing as much as possible so people can connect with me on social media. So if you follow me on social media, you will know where I'll be. And usually a lot of the organizations that like bring me to speak, they're available for free for the community. And so if you stay on, you'll be able to get into a bunch of free, really interesting, cool workshops. They could be in, Oregon, but they'll be available, in your time zone, however possible. So my social media is Dr. Sayida Uplifts. So DR and then Sayida as one word and then Uplifts as the second. And that's Instagram and Facebook. On LinkedIn, I do post there as well. I'm Dr. Sayida Peprah. And I think I have a Twitter as well, which is also Dr. Sayida Uplifts. I have a website, drsayidauplifts.com. And the nonprofit that I do a lot of the community-based doula work out of. That website is diversityuplifts.org and Frontline Doulas. Oh, and one thing I could say about Frontline Doulas, if you don't have doulas in your area and you're a Black birthing person and wanting to connect to doula support, we have a hotline, the Frontline Doula Hotline, where people can call and talk to a doula and get a 50-minute consult just to be able to connect with the doula. Because doulas tend to have a lot of different, perspectives and ideas to support people, even in individual situations that are going on, not just in the full service. If you don't have that available. So that is available to everyone throughout the country now. It was just for California and we opened it up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Add some more links if I can. But yeah. Well, I'm sorry to let everybody go because this was so awesome. I'm so nervous in the beginning because we were just like, okay, how is this gonna flow? But thanks to Sayida Peprah and LaShonda for helping us out today and joining us. And thank you for people who are answering. We are raffling off 4 books, but basically I'm going to do is put all the names of the people who've been active online and who did register. I'm sorry that no one actually got to come on, but we did, address the questions that were here. But you also get entered into our raffle for the 4 books, and we will be reaching out to you. I'm just gonna take a break after
4
this.
Shades of Blue journal. So we do want to.
It's called Inspire Journal, yeah.
Inspire, yeah.
But by Shades of Blue Project, yes, that's the Inspire Journal. So it's a maternal.
And find a chocolate milk cafe to come to. Like, this is basically how we communicate in our meetings. We like to feel what you're feeling and figure out how we can provide support. If we can't figure it out in the meeting, we do follow up to make sure that you're supported, whether it has to do with feeding, mental health. We try and just support you on your journey as a parent.
Yeah. So if you want to see Jillian this week, Thursday, Newark, this evening, Newark on Thursday evening or whatever. And then we do have Oklahoma in the morning on Thursday, and then Kansas City, Missouri is on Saturday. So yeah, we have some coming up. And I got some suggestions, some stuff in my inbox that I'm going to share. But yeah, so thank you all. Lovely seeing you all. I'm going to stop this live feed from Facebook and stop recording, and hopefully we'll post it on our YouTube channel and our website for you to, enjoy at a later date.
Well, thank you for having me.
Peace.
Peace, y'all.
Thank you.